These are funny. Alright, so let's analyze these replays. This is from the ASUS ROG tournament that happened over the past weekend. If you guys missed it, it was an excellent tournament showcasing many Korea versus non-Korea matches. Many of the highest skill TvZs you've managed to see. A couple of upsets that were very interesting. It was cast by Wardy and Lambo for 2 of the days, as well as a little bit of the Muslim and Rotterdam. And there was a bit of a weird circumstance there when it came to why it went the way they did. But anyways, it was a fantastic tournament. And in the round of 8, we got a lovely little matchup between Serral and Byun, which I'm casting now. So it's a best of 5. In the bottom right, not experiencing lag, I suppose. Going for a 12, or not 12 pool, a gas pool. He is Serral. And in the top left, he is the one and only Byun. So Byun coming back from military in like February of this year. Said, I'm back, I'm gonna play again after his year and a little over a year and a half to go into the military for Korea. Came back, unfortunately, still has wrist issues, which just does not bode well. But anyways, hopefully he's dealing with that. Played in the GSL, made it surprisingly far for what you would expect of a guy who just came back from the military. But during military, he had been playing, actually. He had a job where he was capable of playing Starcraft occasionally, not the same amount he used to, but yeah, still occasionally. So he comes back, does well in GSL, has a pretty infamous moment where his wrist hurt him so bad he had to pause against his TvT with Maru. And inevitably, he did end up losing that TvT, but they even warned him because of the pause, because it wasn't a technical reason for pausing. They had to give him a warning. So his wrists really have not been doing so well, so it's always kind of a question mark as to how Byun is going to do for the future. Plus, it's always like, well, how good could he possibly get? He used to be a champion, but he's been away for a little while. What can he do? Well, we got our answer over the weekend, which I'll hold off on spoiling for now, but the answer, at least partially, is that he's done really, really well. Now, the Byun of the past loved the 2-1-1. He was perhaps the best Terran player with the 2-1-1, or certainly the one who used it the most, the longest, and the most effective. Everyone else was kind of going back to the factory openers to eventually going back to entirely factory openers. Byun was still kind of doing 2-1-1s. He went to the military, he comes back, the 2-1-1's really not in fashion. Perhaps a 3rd CC 2-1-1, sure. But as we can see here on the screen right now, Byun once again doing a 2-1-1 off of 2 bases. He just really likes the build, which I guess I'll get into after talking about what Serral is doing. So Serral went for a gas and a pool early on, which is going to give him some pretty fast speed. Unfortunately, not fast enough to really do very much, except to bop the units in the natural. It doesn't stop the command center, but it does bop the units. Even if there are Hellions here, the Hellions often aren't controlled enough, or there's not 4 of them quite yet. There's only 2, and the Lings can kind of like a stoppage, at least, on the workers mining. So that's what happened here. But this is also, I believe, Serral's first indication that it is a 2-1-1. When you see the factory not swapped over, when you see that many Marines, you now recognize what is an older, less used build, and the amount of Marines that he had. The factory timing that was also partially seen by the Lings. He also knows it's a 3cc build. So Serral was going to go for Overlord speed, but upon recognizing that he actually knew what this was, he just canceled it. So now he has, I mean, a bit of an awkward gas count right now. This could have been 100 less gas and then a lot more mineral mining. But he throws down a Roach Warren, which is an interesting response. So the 2-1-1 really fallen out of fashion because it became so expected how to defend. The twists and turns of the 2-1-1 didn't really seem to do as much as they used to. People would identify it with the lack of Hellions. They would build drones up until about 440. They build an extra few queens. Maybe not too many more than they usually would because you already make a decent amount in this matchup, but they still would make a few more. And then you make enough Lings, 20 to 30 Lings, to hit the fence of the 5-minute attack, because that's what this actually drops at, is 5 minutes. And then they would push it away with good queen defense, good Ling control, and then they would continue droning. And not many people could really do enough damage with the build to really make it worth it for how just easy it was to scout. There's a little bit of a twist to the 2-1-1 where you can add on an armory and not swap over the starport in the factory, and instead do a Hellbat attack with 2-1-1 worth of Marines. But This is not what Byun's doing. He literally added on a single alien to help out. Marines come forward, try and do a little bit of dance with the roaches, but the roaches do well enough against the initial influx of Marines. It is still interesting to see Serral go for a roach-worn defense, just because it's not really necessary, I would say. It's like, yes, the roaches do a great job against the low number of Marines and splitting themselves up too, but eventually they become very, like, readable engagements. The guy who's facing the roaches kind of identifies, like, okay, the roaches aren't going to kill this many units, especially if I'm paying attention. Where at Ling Baneling's a little bit harder to really size up fully. It's more explosive. Things can kind of happen there. With against roaches, not so much. So what we'd see actually in the past, and I mean, might happen here again, is that Byun, being one of the masters of the 2-1-1, would actually face a couple of people, like a Dark, for instance, going for a roach defense. And then he would size up the roaches, like he's doing now, and take some okay engagements, because he could actually be like, well, that's not going to change. The roaches don't do, you know, more or less damage depending on how they hit me, like a Baneling would, or how a Ling surrounding me would do, right? The roaches are very easy to size up. So he would, like, literally, against Dark, he would take this engagement, and then he'd just, like, win. Because Dark would be like, well, you weren't supposed to be that confident. Like, fuck off. Like, stop it. Which it can be very scary, but that's what Byun was doing when a lot of other people were like, well, I can't do it to the same effect. The 2-1-1, and here's the thing about the 2-1-1. I'm gonna pause just to spiel about this. The 2-1-1 is like, it's so many people who first learn the build or see the build, especially when they watch someone like Byun, because it's fucking Byun, they're like, wow, the 16 Marine drop is the biggest thing about this build. It's gotta do damage, I've gotta hit hard, and then they lose their Marines. And maybe they do a decent amount of damage, actually. Like, maybe it is a fair trade. It's not actually what you want, though. Like, the build is so much about controlling the Zerg with multitasking and pounceable units. Hellions are not pounceable. Hellions pounce on queens, takes forever to kill them. 60 Marines pouncing on queens, kills them pretty quickly before the Zerg can respond. And it's about controlling the game a little bit, controlling the creeps, but controlling the fourth base timing, taking engagements where you can, you know, taking 20 lings here, 20 lings there, 5 roaches over there. So people just, like, give away their Marines and are like, wow, this build sucks. And, when pros say the build sucks, they mean it for many reasons. When casuals say the build sucks because my 16 Marines didn't win the game, well, you aren't playing it quite correctly. Anywho. Byun eventually also had trouble really utilizing this build as commonly as he used to. I mean, this for a while, guys, was the build. It was 2-1-1 all the way or just die. Maybe for like, you know what, actually, time is quite the concept, isn't it? I have no idea how long it lasted. But for a while, it was the thing to do. Even Byun, with his great control of the Marines and of the build and great confidence with the build, even he started to really struggle. Even he started to face Zergs who could, you know, equally size up his army and his control and always defend perfectly. So it became something you'd throw in every once in a while. But I guess Byun still feels like it is one of those things that just still branches off in his favor, something that he can still control the game with and then branch off into the rest of the game, because he has been using it quite a bit. This is the first game of the series, but we know he's been using it in the tournament the rest of the way as well. So that kind of just identified all the 2-1-1 openings. Now we're already back, we're already past that, right? We're on to 2-2, 3rd CC, 4th CC on the way, tank production, and the Marines really haven't done that great of a job of pushing back the creep. I mean, a little bit here and there, taking that engagement like I was talking about, pouncing on top of the Ravagers as well, because he sees an opportunity. Okay, they're doing that, but they're not really hitting deep into Serral's economy or into his army. There's no main push that is coming from this. And generally that's kind of frightening as a Terran player to be like, well, I'm just gonna drop and then turtle. But, you know, and this is another interesting thing I'll pause the game for. Time is quite the concept, yes. CG 2020, I'm good with words. In general, there's still like a kind of a debate, you know, amongst even, you know, the pros, but certainly amongst people on like Reddit, for instance, which is like, can you let a Zerg get away with X amount of time? Can you let a Protoss get away with X amount of things? Terran, oddly enough, especially when it's not mech Terran, when it is bio Terran, doesn't seem to ever get that many questions about, can you let the Terran go this long without doing X? It's not usually what the discussion is framed around. It's more about what Terran has to do the other races, right? It's just like awfully interesting. But anyways, Cure, as many of you know, kind of came up with a style that wasn't just interesting because of the build order, where you get a much faster second factory for a lot of Widowmines and do a lot of Widowmine drops, the King of Battles tournament. He also, I think it was a notable style because it was so much about just like, he was dealing a lot of damage. When it was new, oh my god, no Zerg player was like expecting it. They were just like, what the hell's happening? So he was doing a lot of damage, yes, but then the rest of his army was going to stay at home. A lot of the Terran bio attacks, the Terran meta, is that you drop occasionally and then you have one really good push alongside it. So there's always more than one thing happening. It's a really great Terran rule in Starcraft, general Starcraft rule. And then also there's going to be a big push so that when they are slightly mishandling the drops, they're going to be very shocked and awed by the main push. And Cure did this thing where he just like did all these drops and didn't really care about the main push. It was even quite turtley, in fact, with his bio in the game, so that when, you know, Raynor, infamous for his run buys, would try and do it to him, being like, well, F your Widowmines, I hate you, there'd be an entire army stopping his run buys, and, you know, he kind of looked a little flabbergasted by it. So I think the concept of like, I have to always do damage, I have to have a killing blow, I gotta do a couple of cuts and then a slice off the head, I think it's actually kind of changing with Terran. Anyways, that's a bit of a tangent, isn't it? A lot of times when I do these cast analysis things, this is an opportunity for me and the chat to kind of discuss things as we watch things unfold. Obviously, I've been a little Terran biased in my dissection because I think Byun has been bringing out an older style, in fact, but in the context of the last few years, a bit newer. But Serral has also been doing interesting things. So we start off with the Roach defense, which is a perfectly viable defense, as we've seen. I just thought it was interesting he chose it. And then he also went for Tunneling Claws, which so far hasn't done anything. It looks like Byun was able to get vision on a Roach with the Tunneling Claws graphic and had a missile turret prepared. So, very excellent defense so far from Byun, leaving units behind. We do have a bit of a push. Not quite maxed out, and not very close to 2-2. About 45 seconds to go on that one, but in a very abusable spot. He was able to clear up enough creep spread and identify the army was not going to be ready for this location, that he can actually grab it with his 5 tanks. Now, what's tricky about Lightshade in this spot is that the tanks don't hit anything in particular. They just don't. So if the Terran wants to move in to start doing real damage to the Zerg, they have to go into a bit more of a vulnerable area. A wider concave, which the Zerg can take advantage of. You know, on the flip side, though, the Zerg, as we see here, trying to go in on this, is going to be going through a choke off creep into a concave defensively, which is not as good. But with a couple of Blinding Clouds, really good usage of the Vipers right there, Serral was able to crack that and make it look super, super easy. At the same time, he did lose the, presence to the top right? I feel like a base went down, but this base actually looking awfully vulnerable. Did I miss one? No, okay. I didn't. He's been losing some presence in the top right. This base could have been vulnerable, but I guess it's all right. Anywho, so at the same time, actually, he's been doing quite well. He's at 84 workers. He's at 5 bases. It's about as good as mining as you can really expect right now. At 11.5 minutes. Byun gets pushed back temporarily, loses out on a lot of tanks, but is actually moving away from tanks, it looks like, anyways. He's going to pure bio. Bit tricky to use per bio, but we'll see. Vanelings are proven to be very effective against a non-AoE army. But even off creep, you gotta respect the bio, you gotta respect the concave, so he's gonna pull back. Drop still not being cleaned up quite entirely is always gonna be a nuisance, but a little hit squad there to take care of it. Serral seems to have things on lockdown. But Byun now a little less trapped on the idea of having to slowly siege up his tanks and then kind of wait for the Zerg to come to him a little bit and move forward inch by inch. Is now on a faster army that can also respond faster too. If the Zerg is going to try and find you in a vulnerable position, you can try and evacuate pretty quickly. The Wood of Mines burrow, your army gets the heck out of dodge, your medevacs pick up units, you know, that type of thing. Which the tanks, unfortunately, can't survive in the same fashion. But beyond going into... Gosh, what even is this? If he had 2 factories, I saw him build a second one, but he's not really using the third one. He's not really using his factories much at all. He's interesting. So he's now up to 8 barracks. So the order of the Terran production for bio guys is that it's 1, 3, 5 or somewhere along those lines, and then it's 8 when you're on 3 base saturation, going on to 4 bases or 3 base all-inning. And those extra 3 barracks are either going to have no tech labs if you're 8 racks all-inning, or they're going to have tech labs, not reactors, if you're going into a macro game. But he's actually getting 2 more barracks already. He's also gotten a couple extra command centers. So here's another thing that you should know about Byun is that kind of past the point of the 2-1-1 becoming too old and too expected, he stopped kind of using it occasionally every now and again, but he mostly moved on to better things. And right before he retired, Byun was playing a lot of late game TvZ. Now, he was playing it when the Raven was different, and then the Raven got changed, so he had to change up his late game playstyle as well. But if you recall, the Raven change made their anti-armor missile do far less damage. So it used to be you could mass Ravens against late game Terran, late game Zerg and Protoss. Then you couldn't. Not really. It'd be helpful to have 1 or 2, I guess, but like not really. And then it went into like mass Ghost and mass tanks with some Liberators and missile turrets for Byun. And he was, again, one of those guys who kind of just like dug his nails in on that style where everyone else was like either trying to kill Zergs beforehand, saying that that style is impossible, it's not working anymore, or were doing that style worse, I suppose, than he was doing. But he had some surprisingly lame games, if I'm being honest. Byun was playing a couple of really lame bio-based TvZ that was still him not doing anything for 20 minutes and waiting for the Zerg player to come to him. I'm gonna be real with you guys, it wasn't that fun. But anyways, we see kind of like the old styles come in here with Byun coming back from the military. I mean, already, right? He's got the 2-1-1 to start off this game, bringing that back into fashion. We know he's done it multiple times, so it wasn't just like, aha, gotcha. Like, he's actually doing it. And then he's also, I think, bringing back the idea of the potential late game TvZ, which, I don't know, it's kind of a rough spot. It's a tricky subject because you don't want to get in the talk of OP or not OP and all that good stuff, but some Terran players do it. Some Terran players can do it, reluctantly do it, but very few are eager to do it, right? Yeah, a bit of an awkward engagement there. Byun kind of gets pushed back. Very low on medevacs as well, so losing a couple was a bit painful. Starting to build that up. So yeah, late game Byun, actually quite a beast. I'd say the one concern for Byun when it comes to late game is his wrists. Like, are his wrists going to explode the amount of multitasking he has to do to actually keep up with his style? I mean, we saw Clem also be a real powerhouse in the late game of TvZ with Bio, where many other Terran players couldn't quite keep up to that extent that they were keeping up. I guess they couldn't keep up to the likes of Raynor and Serral specifically. But Byun is one of the guys who can. I'd say Maru could if he wanted, but Maru's actually been playing quite the defensive style. It's just a rare trait, so it doesn't seem like we have like so many of these late game TvZs that we're able to see at ASUS, which makes the tournament really cool. We saw a lot of late game TvZ that was a beautiful back and forth and not just like a stupid turtle mech game. Thank you, Silly Dobby, for the 22 months. Have a fantastic Monday. You too. Is there burrow for Bane and Lings? Yeah, if you have burrowed roaches, you have burrow for everything. And Festers and Swarm Hosts. Oh, Swarm Hosts get it for free. Sorry, Swarm Hosts get it for free. So we'll even see with Clem, for instance, that even though he'll go into the late game, it's not exactly like he's eager to go into the late game. He'll play around 4 bases pretty quickly, but then they'll like really play this like supercharged, you know, super interesting back and forth game. Not necessarily super eager to go into ghosts. Byun actually is rather eager to get into ghosts. This is what I would say is fairly quick. You know, 14 minutes in a TvZ. Yeah, that's pretty quick. And he has shown masterful use of them in previous eras, and he is once again showing it to us here. Which I'm sure is a bit of a shock for Serral. He uses a lot of Ling Bane on this planetary, and it doesn't quite kill it. There we go, a couple corrosive bows to kill it. We need to get the heck out of there. There's one thing that snipes kind of don't get represented well in, and that's their ability to chase down stuff to a degree, right? There's snipes. That's what I'm talking about. There's snipes. If you run in with 6 ultras thinking I'll just pop this and get out, and there's actually ghosts close, then suddenly you're not just getting in and getting out, you're actually sacrificing stuff. So ghosts have kind of like a difficult spot to be in when it comes to TvZ. Because they are so hard to control, and they oftentimes don't look that great. People usually use them in very defensive setups, you know, concaves behind planetaries and missile turrets, so they look kind of lame even. But in the hands of someone who's very confident with them, they were, yeah, one of the first responses against ultras. The fungals are amazing. Actually, that was a really nicely timed fungal to try and also cancel any snipes that would have come down, but it wasn't going to be so much about snipes. He just needed to kind of stand his ground into a concave, but the fungal made it really difficult, so forced to retreat entirely back. Also taking a lot of damage on his medevacs to the parasitic bomb, but eventually getting away from the army, and Serral's the one that pulls back. A little bit of a squad over here going for both sides. Serral wants to move in, but Byun looks like he's cut up his army just well enough to hold here. And that means he's going to expand into really 3 places at once. If he gets this expansion down, plus this one, then we're going to assume he also gets this one, to the very bottom left, which is quite nice. And that's another thing that you don't necessarily see a lot of in TvZ, is rapid expansions by the Terran, right? There's a lot of cases of TvZ where, at a certain point, the momentum of the Terran has completely gone away. It's just like hard stop, they got killed, they got pushed back, suddenly the Zerg player explodes. And it feels like more like a campaign mission of the Terran player holding against the might of this supercharged Zerg economy and production. Can they do it, yes or no? As opposed to an equal balancing tug of war thing going on. Seesaw effect of I take that base, no I take that base, no I take that base, I take that base. Which again made these TvZs of this past weekend so much more interesting. That it wasn't just Byun going like, oh no, I'm scared, and then turtling on 5 bases and very slowly reaching towards a 6th. No, he cuts up his army in half to match Serral's cut up army, and then gets a planetary in one area, but hell, he even gets an orbital in another area. That's not usually what you would, that's a desperate look for Terrans when they're planting orbitals down in their outward expansions, but for Byun, I'm not sure it's so much desperate as he really just believes that he's going to push from this angle and defend this angle with fewer units, right? So when you push, you kind of want to defend something as well. That's the ideal situation anyways. But if you're not going to push from an area, that's where you get your stack defenses. That's true for all races. Unfortunately, banelings make planetaries go pop pretty quickly. Quite an expensive loss for the Zerg players whenever they do it, though. It is worth mentioning. So he's going to lift over into the orbital. It means 2 locations now are weak. They don't have a real point to return to in case the army itself starts to have trouble. And that's a little scary for the Terran. But because Byun is willing to play a game where he is divvied up, and not like Clem, who has like 2 drops, plus a Wood-O-Mine drop, plus a Liberator harassing, plus his main army. Now, Byun's just literally split up almost 50-50. Which I think really changes up the way that Serral is used to engaging. So every time he moves in, he probably thinks like, okay, I'll have just not quite enough and I'll be able to overpower this. And then it's always the opposite, where Byun actually has just enough and then some that Serral looks a little bit foolish for trying to move in. It looks like Byun in this case actually gives up the entire bottom left, hoping that Serral wasn't going to pay attention, moves all of his army to the top right, so that was a much bigger army than Serral was expecting up to the top right of Lightshade, and then is actually going to move in on top of Serral's bases. So finally Byun goes from the defensive expander Terran, expansionist Terran, that sounds cooler, right? into the main army push Terran that we're kind of more used to seeing. Serral, not really prepared for this, to let his army split up, does take out another base worth of SCVs, but doesn't actually take out the base itself as it just lifted, and is forced to run back home and try and clear things up. But since Byun already had so many bases already set up, I mean, it's starting to get a little bit dry now at 19-20 minutes, but since he did expand almost aggressively, he still has this base that he could always go to once he replaces the workers, if he wants to replace the workers, which he's currently not doing. And then a couple of orbitals extra to throw down those mules. So, and he's making a very inexpensive army. I mean, the most expensive thing he's making are ghosts when he does make them, and then medevacs when he does make them. And then it's marauders and marines. So it's not like he needs, I guess, a ton of economy, right? But now that he's cleared up a little bit of that creep spread, now that he's gotten onto that high ground, he doesn't seem like he's going to let it go. The aggressive ghosts are always scary. If you need a reminder, because you haven't seen ghosts used in a while, ghosts snipe gets interrupted very easily. A fungal hitting them interrupts the snipe. A ling touching them interrupts the snipe. A drone punching them interrupts the snipe. A baneling splash interrupts the snipe. It's a very annoying unit to use correctly, and you usually have to be very careful about using them the way that Byun does. Good eyes there to be able to see the burrow movements. Your burrow graphic is apparent. It's just usually something you're watching out for. And that base is going to go down. A gust of wind interrupts the snipe. Exactly, yes. Couple of lings trying to do something around this third base, but that really wasn't too committed, just enough to distract Byun, I would say. But then even feeling a little bit shy about moving up this ramp. I mean, it's... I think Serral's problem right now is that lack of vision. He, whoops, pressing all the wrong buttons right now. That lack of vision. He knows there's an army that's spread here, but he doesn't know how it's spread or how many widow mines are burrowed. He can't actually get that information just by trying to go up a ramp, so he could have taken that on with the might of his entire army, but he didn't. And then he's also identifying that, you know, at a certain point, his army is just going to be inferior, so if he does accidentally run his entire army into the full might of Byun's army, he would be at a 40 armor supply disadvantage because of the worker count. So that makes taking these engagements very tricky. I mean, Byun, this scenario is basically what happens when you see a spider in your house, right? Like, you both are afraid of each other, but it makes a lot more sense for one of you to be more afraid of the other one, all right? Like, you're afraid of the spider's afraid of you, but it makes a lot more sense for the spider to be afraid of you. And I feel like that's actually a TvZ dynamic in this situation, where Serral is very appropriately afraid of Byun's larger army, but then Byun's also like, yeah, but like banelings. You know, like, I'm also terrified. In this case, actually finding only a portion of Byun's army, he pulls the trigger at the right time, maybe perhaps identifying the amount of army that was left over to the left side, saying, okay, I guess that means I can take up the right. And he absolutely did. Fungal went down as well to support that. And those infestors now out of fungals, in fact. Might not be able to stop these snipes, but there's a lot of Ling Baneling left over as well, so I'm not sure it's going to come down to snipes. The rest of the army comes here to reinforce all the way from downtown, which they get here in the nick of time. Infestors looks like they're not going to be scanned this time around. Just the army to see if he can go ahead and chase that, which he absolutely will. Again, just mostly a Marine Marauder army, and Serral, without the economy to continue this game, just taps out. He might have had, at one point, like a couple of minutes ago, he had like 82 drones. He's down to 62 now. He was still only ever on his original 5 bases, really struggling to get the bases of the bottom left and top right up, because Byun was either taking them or destroying them. Fun game. Thank you. I'm too old for this Twitch. For the Prime sub. Byun playing some pretty good late game. Be right back. All right. Game 2 on Oxide. In the bottom left, down 1, he is the red Zerg Serral. In the top right, as the blue Terran, we got Byun. So Byun playing to the later stages of the game of a TvZ quite well after starting off with a 2-1-1, which really a lot of other Terrans would be scared to use unless they're doing a 3cc version with it, or unless they were doing something sneakier with it than just, you know, literally just a casual 2-on-1. But Byun's not afraid of anyone. He no afraid anything. And he's always been quite good at TvZ. In fact, back when TvZ was actually a meme, when Zerg was actually overpowered, and at the time, of course, they wouldn't admit it, but history does not look kindly on Zerg in many metas, as it doesn't look kindly on them in Brutal and Fester, which everyone agrees, including the Zergs themselves, was OP as fuck. But at the time, they were like, no, just do the thing. Ew. There's another time. Swarm hosts were obnoxious, but I'm not sure they were OP. But anyways, there was another time where Zerg was definitely the best race, and that was the beginning of Legacy of the Void. Never forget, Protoss get their expansion, they have to relearn their entire race. Even everything. Everything changed for them. Zerg got nothing but buffs. Protoss expansion, Zerg's got nothing but buffs. Never forget. Now, of course, this was 5 years ago, so can only be salty for so long. But anyways, one of the things that they got was that they got an extra armor on their Ultra. So what is Ultra armor now when it's fully upgraded? It's 7, and it used to be 8, I think it was. I think that's the way it goes. They were quite good. At the same time, in the expansion, Marauders went from having 1 single attack to having 2 attacks. Literally, their animation got changed. You played the Legacy of the Void beta at BlizzCon, and you were like, what are the Marauders doing? This looks weird. What's happening? And then you finally realized what was going on. Those two things combined with that Ultras were pretty fucking bullshit. They were stupid. Because when high armor is in play, multiple attacks do worse, right? You want one big attack that only gets affected by the armor once, as opposed to many small attacks that get affected by the armor as many times as the attack happens. Byun comes in after another retirement phase. Byun went to the military recently, and that made sense as far as retirement goes, but there was another time where Byun went from being one of the forgotten children of Prime, because he was being overshadowed by other people on that team, to kind of retiring, kind of just like, you know, not playing very much, to suddenly being, you know what, Legacy of the Void, let's try this, let's do this. And he came in swinging. Did all the online cups, had like a 16-week win streak on a Lehman League or something crazy, and then that's the story we know him for, as he became a GSL competitor and then a BlizzCon champion. He was very good when a time when every other Terran was like, well, this is just stupid, this is just bullshit, I can't do anything. He was making things work. He was one of the first guys to really look at ghosts and use them correctly. Someone else decided that ghosts were a good reason, a good way to deal with ultras, I believe, but he used them the best. He also uses multitasking the best, which he still does. Anyways, that's what we give credit to Byun for. Byun, also just a good, smart StarCraft 2 player, has changed things up a lot here. So this entirely looks like a 2-1-1. Let's pause the game and talk about the game for once. Serral has gone for not an early pool gas this time, just 3 base opener, but then has added on a Roach Warren and another gas. So him perhaps expecting Byun to continue with this reactor barracks that he has scouted, but not for a while. is probably thinking 2-1 again. Because Byun's also been using the build a lot throughout the tournament. If he had gone back in to check, he would still see a barracks on the reactor and would still think 2-1-1. Maybe the Marine count would look a little off. He'd be like, huh, that's a little weird, but not enough that you would actually be able to say yes or no to that being a second barracks behind there. So definitely looks like a weird setup. Byun has definitely, 100%, successfully tricked every Zerg, unless the Zerg at Overlord speed. Every Zerg, this is a 2-1-1. When actually, he's going for Banshees. Banshees, very strong counter to early Roaches. Serral immediately is set up incorrectly in this game. If he knew this was happening, he wouldn't add on Roaches. I should be more drunk for this history lesson. Yeah, one day I'll actually edit that and release a drunk history. One day. And so on top of this little trick, Byun isn't going for like a third CC, which also is a decent gotcha move to look like a 2-1-1, get up to a Banshee or two, and then actually add on a third CC. That might be okay. He's actually gonna go into a Marine Hellbat Banshee attack. Serral sees the Marines and is already being like, what the hell? Why are they walking? Then he sees the Hellions and he's like, what the hell? Why are there Hellions here? Then he sees the Banshee and further question marks, I'm sure, are arising. Unfortunately for Serral, while that was actually a fairly good scout, that was just a little bit of time to give you some notice, right? That was a little bit of like a what the fuck? Okay, let's try and handle this. His setup to this moment isn't really great. The first Banshee has already given him a little bit of trouble. Not too much. It looks like he did build, I guess, the spores as soon as he saw the Banshee. It flew over this Overlord, right? So it's not too much trouble, but it's already a bit of a bother. He's already a bit surprised. He went for a Roach Warren for what was presumably going to be more of a mid-game attack until he saw the Banshee. And then had an extra gas that was perhaps a little bit faster than he would like if you were going to play as much macro as possible. So while he has the same amount of time to build from that production of larva as he would in, any other circumstance, I guess, the setup on the way here wasn't perhaps the best that it could have been. And now he's completely undefended. This doesn't look pretty. And, maybe he holds, but I think he actually taps out of this one. Losing the third hatch is not going to be a good start to a game. Banelings are gonna connect. Not even. Not even. You don't need stim or being off creep to kill what is only Banelings going down in a straight line to your Marines. Most people could probably micro their way out of that one. Serral is restarting his hatchery at that same third, but that was a painful, painful opener. And we can even, let's go back and see the exact moment of sadness. Let's predict when Serral went, oh fuck. So, opener's fine. Ling gets in actually, so Ling sees the barracks. Overlord's like, I don't need to see anything, just pull us back. Believe this is about as normal as an opener for the Zerg as it gets until he makes that Roach Warren. Second gas going down to probably going, I would have expected a mid-game attack, but then he did have the Roaches in the last game as response to 2-1-1, so actually it's more just his response to 2-1-1 that he's mentally preparing for. It looks like the Banshee flew by this Overlord, actually. Or the Ling. The Overlord, either one, but that is when he makes a Spore Crawler, so that was a little bit lucky on him too. But he has the Roach Warren that he wants to defend a 2-1-1 with. I forgot that's what his choice was. But still, he wants to defend the 2-1-1 with that, and it's not actually just, it's not the 2-1-1, it's Banshees. So, I think what happens next is that he thinks, oh, it's Banshees, okay, then I can build drones and just deal with the harassment. And usually you'd be correct, but you can't build drones if the attack's coming in, right? So I think that's where things went wrong. I think that's the moment that his heart shatters. And that's when he builds a Baneling Nest. His lair is probably around the way because he thought, like, oh, it's a macro game. But I think the Baneling Nest comes down when he sees this push coming across. Now, if I recall correctly, this is when Lambo on the cast was like, he saw the push. I don't know why he didn't make roaches. And I gotta agree. Why didn't he make roaches? I'm not sure. He could have... Well, his supply might have been the reason, because it really is quite awkward. He built those drones, like his instant reaction to seeing a Banshee was to identify harassment, not direct attack. And if it's just harassment, Zergs can drone. If it's a direct attack, they can't drone. So that instant reaction actually ends up killing him.
Twitch Prime sub received.
Perhaps if he had waited and been a little more, I guess, what is this? And maybe actually would have been able to have the larva, money, and supply to build roaches. Thank you very much, Untergedürkert. Okay, hold on. Untergedürkert. Okay, maybe I am a Thome ad gamer at this moment, but something like that. Thank you for the Prime sub. So I have a guide video for this 211. I do have a guide video for the 211 build that I believe has been done by Byun on the video. It's German. Oh, okay, so I'm not just like totally misreading this. I just don't know what the hell the word is. So, yeah. So we've identified what happened there. Alright. This is what slowing the game down and giving another look-see does for you. So he doesn't have the supply, because he just built a round of drones. The Banelings might have done the trick if they were being made now, which is like a little bit of support from Lings and Queens, but they're too late. That's what killed him. And then his Overlord actually died, so he's like really supply blocked, but... Yeah, the drones being made, it's almost as if the Banshee being sighted here, what I initially deemed as lucky, I actually think you would rather have not seen it, maybe, and then maybe we're building Lings, because this still hits at, well, it hit at 5:10, let's say, but like 5 minutes is when the 211 hits, right? So if Serral was under the impression this is a 211, funnily enough, without seeing that Banshee, he might have made either 7, 8 roaches or 20 Lings, either one, and then had a better chance to actually kill the attack. He would have lost drones to the Banshee, no doubt about that, and that's the trade-off there, right? But I think he wouldn't have died. He would have taken damage. I don't think he would have died. Anyways. One of those funny things, right? Thank you very much, Dangerlanda, for the 14 months. Maybe intentional from Byun to show the Banshee. You know, I'm not sure that it was. He actually, there was a little bit of a weird micro thing where he went like, burp, burp, and then he went through. He like tried to dodge the Ling and then inadvertently went to the Overlord. So I actually think he meant to hide it. Because the thing is that, theoretically, let's say this build actually executes like it's supposed to. The Banshee's a complete surprise. If the Banshee's a complete surprise, there's no Spore Crawlers. You don't want to build Spore Crawlers when you think it's a 2-1-1 because they really aren't necessary. And that's 3 drones, 50 murals you would rather have elsewhere. The Banshees, then, one of them kills maybe, let's say, 7 drones is fair. Without any detection, right? Maybe they get pulled away, sure, but it takes a while for the Spore Crawler to finish. Let's say it kills 7 drones. The second Banshee also probably comes in as an aggressive Banshee. I think it got sniped. Pretty sure I made a second Banshee. Yeah. The second Banshee then comes in as a cloaked fighter. And Serral also takes damage on his queens from that. And his Ling Roach presence might be stronger, like I was saying. And maybe it pushes the ground army away. There's still a lot of kerfuffle. There's still a lot of like, oh shit. And there's a lot of messing up your mechanics and messing up your flow, which is deadlier to Zerg than any other race, I would say. Because their production is either or, it's not both. So I think Byun's intention is to hide the Banshees, because that is probably what gets buku damage done anyways. But in this case, it also did buku damage, just not in the way you would usually intend. This is my guess. Thank you very much, Rustinant. Thank you for the 200 bits, as well as Silly Dobby for the 100 bits. Series was amazing. I mean, I know the spoilers. I know that I was kind of like watching it on my side monitor while this was happening, but... Alright, so he kills the third hatchery. Serral tries to rebuild. Serral has made comebacks before, and I feel like if this was a circumstance where he got drones killed, but saved his third and killed this army, I think this could have been one of those epic Serral comebacks, but actually losing the third and not dealing with the army, I don't think Serral comes back from this. So, Byun, meanwhile, goes back into building production, which is almost all done at this point. He's got our 1-1 on the way. I mean, it was kind of an expensive build. If Serral did go for Overlord speed this game and actually got a full scout, this probably is a really, really terrible start to a Terran build order. It's so awkward. But that's the risk he took, and it worked out beautifully. Serral did not bother going for Overlord speed this game. Even with the damage Byun has done, it's always a bit courageous for Terrans to move forward without their medevacs, but very safe tank siege up position. Now going on to the creep. Serral goes for a handful of mutas, as that is what his larva can probably afford, right? He doesn't have a fourth hatchery. His third hatchery only just got replenished. Doesn't have a lot of larvae to work with. So 9 mutas are actually able to spend his bank, where if you made 18 lings, it'd look a lot less impactful. And if the mutas could actually kill the tank and then get across the map, which lings are trying to do right now, again, we start to believe in the Serral comeback potential, but let's see. 1-1 also finishing up on these Marines. Combat shield does start late. That was just a slip up there from Byun. Forgot to get that. But it's okay. He's going to save his tank just barely from the mutas. Serral finding himself really supply blocked. Actually builds like 7 overlords right there. 3 and then 4 more. Certainly not helping his defense. And I guess Byun was checking for a kind of secret fourth base. There is none. The Banelings have to go around this little pillar, which means the tanks are getting excellent shots on them. The mutas do finally take down the one weak tank, but another one reinforces. Siege is up. Serral's gonna try and bust out of this, but off creep in a single file line with the Banelings, which roll on top of the tanks anyways instead of the Marines, are not gonna do the trick. Serral's got a couple of queens still alive and being able to tank quite a bit, but they actually can't kill anything that quickly. So they're their main problem. If they tank shots, that's actually the best case for the Zerg player. But they shouldn't be doing that anyways. A good Terran player will always be target firing the Banelings. In that case, no more Banelings were left over, so Serral is forced to tap out. GG. The old gotcha move. Byun is smart cookie sometimes. Byun's definitely not a pro that we attribute tactics to. Strategy to, and I know some people will instantly yell at me for this, and good StarCraft play is always in a way very intelligent, and I'm totally on board with that sentiment, but let's be real. I mean, we don't compare Byun and TY's way of playing. We don't say they play in similar ways, do we? TY is a tactics-based guy. Byun can throw in a couple of different builds, but he is certainly more of the mechanics guy, actually, that we would think of. Anyhow. Death Aura is Serral's last chance to put a point on the board. In the bottom right is the red Zerg. He is Serral. In the top left, we got the blue Terran, Byun. At this point in the tournament, Byun has already knocked out stats, or taken down stats, and he already had taken down Raynor as well, so already proving his EVT prowess, and then he faced what I guess is still considered kind of one of the final bosses of any tournament, which is Serral. So if he were to topple Serral, that would mean that I guess he's knocked out almost every... the best contenders of each race, of Protoss and Zerg at least, yeah. I don't think he'd played too many TvTs. I think he took out Clem maybe? Or was that Maru? Well, either way. Either way. Point is, he's playing very well. After a decent GSL, which is promising, because it really is quite close to when he returned to military. And even though he's able to play in military, it still is very different from being able to actually train. I mean, Byun's ability to come back into the pro scene has been, I don't think, short of remarkable. Especially when you compare him to a lot of the other Terrans that have returned, or did return and then left. So MMA tried, but then while MMA could have maybe tried more, I believe he got an offer to be a League of Legends coach? Shit. I don't remember what he got. But he got a much better offer, something that actually had more of a future, let's be real. And no fault in him to go to that. Would have loved to have seen MMA return to form, but it is what it is. Bomber also recently retired, if you didn't hear the news. His team actually announced it for him, but Bomber tried to come back. Didn't really work out very much at all. I do wonder how much he was putting into it, but he's retired. And then I guess we have Tasia. And now Tasia has done some pretty good things. His home story cup runs have been really quite good, and I could see him, in the right circumstances, returning to championship form. But he hasn't yet, and there's definitely question marks about his health. I think he actually mentioned in one of his interviews, the GSL, that he needs to focus on his health. So, unfortunate there is really, it's a bit of a meme, but it's a true one. Which is that all these Terran, Korean Terrans especially, but generally Terrans are the ones with all these wrist issues. And I don't mean to sound too biased, but it is definitely because Terran is the hardest race. I'm just saying. They got a 1-1-1 set up for Byun. Looks like it is going to be no medevac, so it could be a Hellbat attack. Yeah, I'm guessing the armory comes down. I was waiting for the third marine to be formed, and then I was going to confirm it, but seeing the medevac also confirms it. If it wasn't going to be a Hellbat attack, then you would have seen a tech lab added onto the barracks and a Liberator pop out of this. No. Without that tech lab, it's going to be the Hellbats. There's the armory. There's the confirmation if you didn't believe me before. And now Serral has obviously a lot of things to consider. The Byun 2-1-1, still as potent as ever, is still something worthy of consideration. But then his trickery is also now something he has to worry about. In this case, he sees a medevac drop of Marines, and this should tell you that it's a Hellbat drop. A Hellbat attack, sorry. It's a Hellbat attack. It should tell you. There's always a chance that it's something else that's a little bit weird. There was a point in Starcraft 2, Legacy of the Void, where, like, a tank Marine medevac push was, like, a thing against Zerg, but it should just say, alarm bells, hey, it's going to be Hellbats. And one of the really nice ways to defend Hellbats, if you know of it fast enough, which Overlord Speed would certainly tell you, in this case it was just an Overlord, is that you can get a spine crawler, and then just defend wherever elsewhere the Hellbats go. Because these things aren't really great at killing buildings. As long as you don't lose your entire army, you're fine. You're not going to jump on top of this third hatch and suddenly kill it, right? So an excellent defense there from Serral. Really nice scouting this game. It was actually accurate scouting as well. He gets into the natural with a couple of lings, which is always bothersome, and Byun realizes very quickly that this will not be working out. He's going to go into Banshees. He's already planning on going to Banshees beyond this. Best case scenario for a guy opening up like this is that you get the damage done with the Hellbats and the Marines. Maybe not game-ending damage, but you get damage done, cause the kerfuffle that really messes up the Zerg flow, and then your Banshees come in and go like, haha, sucker. And they dance around all the spore crawlers you've built. Because the queens are either dead or out of transfuses. Well, this isn't really the ideal setup. The queens should still be very healthy. They should still have transfuses. Ling and now Banelings are available, so the Hellbats really shouldn't do a whole lot. Byun's going to try and do something with his army, but it just seems so very unlikely. Serral also getting a forward spore crawler just to make sure this type of BS doesn't kill him. So Byun is now committed quite a bit to units that aren't necessarily going to help in the future. Hellbats kind of just have they're kind of countered with the same amount of units as the Marines are, you know? They don't really, technically they're splash, technically they're tankier than the Marine, but at the end of the day, if you've got enough Banelings, you've got enough Banelings when it comes to dealing with Hellbats. So I would want to say that Hellbats can add to the main attack, the Marine attack, and they certainly can. If suddenly they are 3 or 4 Banelings short, they could really regret life in the game that they've played. I don't know if it's going to be the biggest deal. The Banshees also should be very easy to deal with from someone with Serral's attention to detail, his caliber of play. As I say that, a couple of drones do go down. But they shouldn't be adding too much more, and Serral should be mostly doing what he can. Byun's gonna actually move on top of this 4th hatchery, seeing that it's very low. He does grab the cancel. He's gonna try and back away perhaps before the Banelings actually get those connections. I mean, if you can keep the Hellbats alive, then by all means, keep them alive. Don't just throw them away willy-nilly. You know, they might not be that useful for the eventual push. Looks like one of the Banshees went down to the Queens, not being controlled while he bopped that 4th hatchery. And the 2nd Banshee, now out of energy, is going to go down as well. Scouting pretty much nothing, but you can anticipate the Spire if you don't scout it. Yeah. Overlord wants to come in to get that Overlord's creep drop, but not gonna happen. Byun's follow-up Marine attack is now coming forward. It's already got the medevac with it. It's got Hellbats still trying to protect it. Serral is going to take this seriously, but actually the Hellbat's being used before the Marines join in. Maybe a bit of a mistake. I guess he wanted to kind of set it up, maybe stop some creep from being pushed out, and instead found himself just losing the Hellbats before the Marines were even close to trying to help. So a little bit unfortunate there. Combat shields has once again been delayed, by the way, so it seems to be just kind of a trend amongst Byun's gameplay. He's a little bit late to that specific upgrade. I would dare say that you want your combat shield started before your 2nd factory. I dare say that. At least his 1-1 is well on the way, and of course he already has an armory, so he should go swiftly into 2-2. Means that his upgrades are a bit faster than Serral's. Marine's still trying to do some work. Woodamine's gonna look for a great shot, doesn't really find it. The Marines are just picked up and gone off to the right, as there is no anti-air quite yet. He's gonna try to abuse that. Seeing as he has not seen roaches this game, I think it would be very erroneous of Byun to assume there won't be mutas. Yes, some people do play with pure Ling Baneling, but I would say if you see Ling Baneling, you should just anticipate the Spire, and hey, there you go. Mutas are on that 3rd base before the missile turret was done. So it was a bit of a surprise. At least the drop gets out and unloaded completely, and now he knows to worry about those mutas. But a little bit of SCV damage taken. 6 SCVs, certainly not a bad start for the mutas, which will continue to grow in numbers as well as upgrades. +1 flyer attack, almost 75% done. Finally, combat shields will be done. Byun can start taking some, maybe perhaps real engagements. Also does help considerably against those glaive worms of the mutas if their numbers grow too large. But yeah, combat shields is finishing. So centrifugal hooks, and we're getting into the mid-game of TvZ. Serral has gotten comfortably to 5 bases, 81 drones, probably gonna add on a few more drones afterwards, and is continuing to spread out that creeper. Byun, happy on his 3 bases, needs to also think very quickly about getting his 4th up and running. So it's already about done, but then actually getting it on location, defended against the surely growing number of mutas. He knows that, we know that, already up to a count of 17 almost, with +1. That's already a scary number of mutas, actually. When it hits the 20 mark, that's when you're like, oh shit. Oh no. Oh jeez. But yeah, 17 is also pretty good. Drilling Claws on the way makes a lot of sense, as well as a couple of Thors, especially when it comes to defending against the mutas. Boosting that around a medevac is very, very helpful. Perhaps a bit of a mistake on the engagement. Byun's gonna be able to split away from this. He's off creep. He's got Woodamine to fall back into, and Serral still wants to take it. A bit surprising, but ends up that he was correct. Just the amount of units he had was too much. The lift up is partially good. He does manage to save one of the medevacs full of units. Very, very low, but still healthy and alive. And Byun is going to be able to retreat. So will Serral. That was a dangerous engagement for both of them, really. The Woodamines weren't quite in place to protect the army. And while they were fallen back to, they still weren't quite enough, as we saw. But for Serral, I mean, all it takes is miscounting the middle Woodamines or mis-splitting against the Woodamines. And off of creep, well, suddenly you're in trouble. Thor pops out at a very opportune moment, but doesn't need to repair it, and that's actually not something that Byun is paying attention to. He is trying to lift up his first Thor in a medevac to come over here. So maybe he could have saved the 2nd Thor if he had done the mass repair. He still would have lost a lot of SCVs in the process. The mutas were still doing a great job of magic boxing. And 15 SCVs go down, a Thor goes down. A lot of the mutas end up escaping. Did you only lose 1? I said 17 earlier, so he only lost a couple at the very least. That was a nice muta flyby. Also dealing with a drop over to the right, so Serral now on 5 bases saturated. Didn't actually add on any drones, so I thought he would add on more to up to 85, but just around 80. He's also trying to get up his 6th base, and that might be a little bit of a stretch. His creep spread's not quite covering it, and he's also chased down that one medevac, so his Muta's not quite in position. His army not quite in position to deal with this. How many Widowmines are we talking? 9, but they're certainly not all here. I don't see all of them. Okay, we got 4 on the front lines. And just what is going to, I guess, be a very good concave. And certainly that's what Byun's looking for. He's dodging around. He's looking for the micro capability that we all know he's capable of doing a lot of things with micro. But it's always dangerous to kind of taunt the Zerg player and say, like, I'm better at microing than you are. It's a little dangerous to do. Good save on the Thor, though. Speaking of his micro, good pullback on the Marine. So far, so good. Using the concave, using the space outside of creep to do the maximum amount of damage, where most other Terran players would have made a mistake already. Not getting the concave, not pulling back the Marines. Byun so far is doing quite well. And I think this hatchery does have to be given up by Serral. He's going to respect that. He tried, he danced around, they both danced around. They played footsies for a little while, but Byun clearly had the upper hand. Serral couldn't have quite the right engagement. He had the supply, sure, but he didn't quite have a good setup. Now he's taking out a couple Widowmines. Maybe he tries to pounce on top of this. No, he's not going to take it. I mean, the 6th base isn't really, it's already dead, first of all, so why risk it? But then also, it is something you could give up. And that's exactly what he did. 3-3 is also about to finish for Byun, where Serral is going to be stuck on 2-2 for a while longer. We all know how that goes in TvZ. Could pick up on the Widowmines. Again, Byun's medevac micro looking pretty hot. He also did have some pretty good tank vac micro back in the day. You guys remember that? +3 was started a lot faster than +3 armor, but I guess his +2 armor started a lot slower is the more correct way to put it. But +3 attack is the most important for the Terran. Now moving around the bends, looking for another open opportunity. Again, not a lot of creep spread over here. I don't think Serral was so much denied of this creep spread as he was just late to spreading it, because he was trying to spread creep over here. So one vulnerable area leads to another vulnerable area. Serral's army is not all here. He's going to try and get some good connections while he can. But that's 3 Thors guarding the front lines. One of them in the red, but still saved. And their hatchery is going to fall. Drones are pulled away. Byun doing an excellent job on the attack. What about on the defense? He's got 2 command centers that are going to be vulnerable. A lot of units flying through. A handful of Ling Baneling taking out Widowmines left and right. And now taking out those command centers. The 2 ones that are being built are now canceled. The 3rd one that was actually already completed could go down as well, or perhaps the planetary and then the command centers would also be pretty nice. The Banelings maybe just enough to actually kill this planetary with the help of the Muse, with the help of the Lings. It is going to go down. And while Byun pulls back to defend, he's already lost quite a few resources. 21 SCVs, the planetary, 200 minerals worth because of the canceled command centers, a handful of Widowmines, a handful of missile turrets, and of course Byun has to pull back entirely to deal with this, so that gives a lot of room for Serral to breathe, and he certainly needs it. He just lost 2 hatcheries. He had just replaced this one, but then to lose this one as well, if Byun didn't have to pull back, it could have maybe snowballed even further. Instead, now momentum has been completely halted for the Terran, and Serral can not only look to replace his economy, which doesn't look that bad. You know, he'd say 5 hatcheries, 74 drones isn't that bad. With the style he's playing, I would say it's actually a little bit dangerous. You don't feel so confident. You know, with this style, you're probably thinking more of, yeah, 85 drones and reliably 6 bases moving on to a 7th. So he really needs to get that up, but he also can think about getting up his hive tech. So he's already got +3 melee on the way. He's already got Adrenal Glands finished, but he could even add in a couple ultras if he so desires. I know we all think ultras are a bit of a meme, and let's be real, sometimes they are, but they also can be very helpful defensively. It's offensively trying to end a game, trying to chase down the bio army that ultras are a little bit funky. A Ling run by finding a very unsuccessful wall. It's like he tried and then he gave up. We're going to take down a lot of supply depots instead. And Serral is going to just give up that right side base once again. Letting it go. Now this is really where it gets awkward for the Terran player. They're forced to kind of base trade this out. They're the one, like, there's a sense of urgency overall in the Starcraft game, a game of Starcraft, but especially in a game like this. But that urgency usually goes a little bit worse for the Terran as they push themselves onto creep, as they push themselves into non-concaves, into these chokes. which sometimes goes in favor of them, but then other times lets the banelings get the most effective engagements. That's where things can really go topsy-turvy. Byun was hoping for a lot more. When he committed to that push, when he kind of even accepted a bit of the base trade, he really wanted more than just that hatchery to the right. He wanted to crack this hatchery, push into the common reinforcement point of all the hatcheries, and then continue pushing in and really starting to make the Zerg sweat. Instead, what happens is that Serral kind of was starting maybe a little bit nervous, ends up saying, oh, okay, that's fine. That's great. I just killed your SCVs, I've killed your economy, I killed your other reliable base, and I only lost one hatchery for it. That's fantastic for me. So Byun is once again in another type of all-in situation. His armor supply is slightly better than his opponent, but upgrades have evened up. And he is once again going to be forced to move on to creep whenever he does try to engage. I'm not sure time is on Byun's side. He at least has a planetary up for his 4th base again, but it's also going to start running out of minerals. The muta count not only a decent size at 21, but I believe also getting that +2 flyer attack can be quite deadly. Another hatchery does fall. Byun's finding moves. He's constantly finding these outside bases. A little vulnerable, but Serral, so far, by giving them up, by not trying his damnness to actually save them, has been playing the better game when it came to the resources trades, because he's also killing Byun's bases. Another planetary goes down at the cost of many banelings, we can't necessarily replace easily, but it might just be worth it because, again, not only killing the base, not only killing the base, 26 SCVs, also bringing Byun's army back, giving him time to breathe. It's actually a pretty tight game, as Serral's economy isn't as good as it looks since he's on his first 4 bases, which are getting mined out. He doesn't have that endless income, but it's still good enough. And he still has these mutas. He still has control of the game. He still has creep spread to work on, and that is going to be good enough, I believe, to really make this 50 supply difference true. All right, like it's not a 50 supply difference of army supply, but in terms of the pacing of the game, then it is actually pretty accurate. Byun is in a whole heck of a lot of trouble. The mutas flew over Marines for a little while there, but the muta count's still actually looking quite good. 17 is back to where it started, I guess, but still good enough. As you see, a lot of Marines have to chase this down. Every Thor out of the main battle is quite a significant chunk of his army gone. And in fact, that one was like in a very vulnerable Winnipeg. I was a little concerned there. But it's also a lot of attention being divvied up here, which is also true for the Zerg, no doubt about it. The mutas are very vulnerable units, so Serral's having to creep spread, rebuild his hatcheries, rebuild his drones, make sure his banelings don't roll into a wood of mine, and make sure his mutas are not flying over a pack of Marines and Thors. No doubt about it, but banelings, a little bit easier to kind of find the opportunities. Byun is the one that has to kind of siege up his units. Not many of them, to be fair. Widow Mine, now not even here anymore, actually. Singular and now none. Not really a siege unit anymore, is it? And without that AoE, the banelings will be able to conquer the rest of the army. That's not all of Byun's army, sure, but it was still a significant amount of it. Byun now on the right side, coming in with 2 Thors, but the magic box is going to be good enough. Not enough Marines to support them either, and Byun is going to be cleaned up on either side of the map. GG. Serral takes game 3 and does not get 3-0'd. But it's actually kind of a tight game, as I was saying. Like, there was many times where if Byun had been able to save 1 base more, if he didn't lose 2 to the mutas, if he didn't have to cancel the command centers when he did, then he might have actually been able to push the seesaw the other direction. You don't push a seesaw. But you get the picture. What do you do? You just sit on a seesaw. I don't even know what the act would be. You push it down with your butt. Yeah. Thanks, Creative Beast. You always got my back. A better phrase would be, I guess, he would pull the tug of the tug of war. No, that's not actually a good phrase either. I was gonna say you would tug the tug of war rope, but that's a very awkward phrase. Tip the scales? Oh, that's so much better. Thank you. Exactly. Give her up a tug job. Oh no. Oh no. Serral dropped an ultra onto the seesaw, catapulting Byun into the upper atmosphere. I do love that. That's a great analogy. True, Barrett, true. People are trying to make my seesaw thing work. I just don't think it does. That's fine, though. We're on to game 4 on the top right. As the reds there got Serral. Bottom left of Pillars of Gold, he is Byun. Byun didn't get any tricky start to the last game, which really is quite good for Serral. Serral in a macro game is undeniably one of the best. It's funny that we don't necessarily think of him for his overwhelming style of play. Serral is so solid in basically everything he does that to mark one thing, I suppose, that he's really known about would be a little... Oh, not disingenuous. It would just be like it wouldn't really encapsulate the player, right? To say that his late game macro is fantastic is kind of like redundant. It's kind of like a doy. Like what else is new? But for other players, you know, we talk about innovation. We almost always hype up his mechanics and his ability to seemingly overwhelm his opponent. Yet he has many other things going for him as well. For Serral, it's like, well, everything goes for him. So the idea is that if you're on even terms with Serral, you're behind. If Serral's a bit behind, you're even. So on and so forth. So he's very good. And while I think Raynor also gets a lot of credit for his late game ZVT, I think it's a little bit flashier. Is what it comes down to, really. Serral is all about just the best of perhaps the mundane, but still the best at it. Raynor is a bit flashier in both personality, you know, his on-camera presence, but also in his actual playstyle. There's no doubting that there's going to be the same effect when you play these guys. When you're playing a late game Raynor or a late game Serral in a ZVT, you're probably going to feel like you aren't making any headway. You attack to the left, kill a base, you attack to the right, kill a base, you do it over and over again, you're like, what the hell? How is this guy not dead? I think you get the same feeling from both players. I believe they swap between Central and West, if I'm not mistaken. Between 100 and 150 ping, I think is what Showtime was saying it's around.
Subscription received.
Anyways,
You are doing something right,
thank you,
Captain.
Dr. Sidewinder, for the 64-month resub. So Byun is opening up with something I'm not even different, actually, very much the same as last game. So it's going to be another Hellion opener. Perhaps this time hoping that the Overlord's not going to scout it. He did literally run into the Overlord with Marines, which was instantly enough information. This time, it's technically, I suppose, the scout is a tad bit later because he will have to go in. But still, enough time for Serral to get the Spine Crawler. He's actually going to go ahead and wall off. He saw the Hellions coming forward and realized that perhaps his opponent was going to try and race towards his drones, which really is not a bad idea for Byun. He went for, what is this, like literally the fastest? This is, okay, so, okay, you know what? Let's just rewind here. So, this is not only one of the fastest Hellbent attacks that you can do in general. There are a few, there's like one build that's faster that hits with like 4 Hellbats, I think, but it's a very old and kind of bad build. It's that Serral has a 430 speed finish. And I'm like, what happened? Oof, that's a lot of ping. Yeah, but it's for both of them, so. The worst of both worlds. Thank you for the 200 bits. So what happened here? What's Serral's decision? So, and did Byun see his late speed? Is most of what I'm looking at. Well, he doesn't even put a third guy in gas, so that explains one part of it. But even when he could get speed, he decides not to. And that's not really based off of any information that he sees right now. But I think that what it is based off of is that the things that have hit him, the 2-1-1 and the Banshee build we saw in game 2, I think don't hit. And the Hellbat attack doesn't actually hit before speed would be done. Sorry, I could put that better. All the builds that Byun has done, Serral could push speed off for. That's a much better way to put it. And I guess that's what he's thinking right now. That's what he's doing. He's like, well, I don't need speed ASAP because this guy's not building Hellions to patrol my creep spread and to find an opportunity like we would see in a normal game. If this is a normal factory opener into a third CC or into Banshees, whatever, the Hellions kind of posture. They're like, what's happening? What's going on here? And if they don't see speed, if they don't see Lings, if the queens aren't in the right position, that's when they zoom on by. And having speed is a necessity to stop that from killing all your drones. If Byun's not going to do that, then, you know, why get speed the fastest that you can? Why bother? So I think that's what Serral's thinking. And then Byun has actually not seen anything. Nothing. But perhaps in the last couple of games, witnessing the later speed, he's like, well, I'm just going to try and rush in. So Serral, very appropriately, is like, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck. And I don't know if Byun is, like, because Byun can't see that speed isn't done. Like, he has no idea that this is a later speed build until literally right now, right? But by that time, not only would the queens have been in position and Lings at least available, without speed, sure, but they still would have been available. There's now a wall, so Byun almost had an opportunity to run in, but he didn't quite know it. Serral's response was too fast anyways. And now we just talk about defending the regular old Hellbat push. Enough Lings, a little bit of a just jointed army from the Terran. Good focus fire on top of the medevac, and pushing that spine crawler forward means a good defense. It did take a little while. You know, he had to emergency wall, but he does cancel the third evolution chamber. Now has 2 evos he'd be using anyways, eventually. And goes back into droning as the follow-up to this build is not usually that potent. We saw last game, Byun tried to follow up with a couple Banshees, and Serral was able to deflect it very easily. So that's what Serral would have to worry about if he did not have an Overlord flying through. I think he did see the tech lab, though, previously, so he does have a couple Spore Crawlers, but it's not going to be the Banshee attack. He doesn't need a third or fourth one out in the middle of the map. It is, in fact, going to be a Raven. You could see that as a Zerg player, by the way, and be like, oh, it's a safety Banshee. Because if this Hellbat attack hit into Roaches, the Roaches are coming across the map now, and a safety Banshee isn't necessarily a terrible idea. So, seeing no cloak, could just anticipate it's a safety Banshee. He's gonna get like his third check-in. I think he just bypassed the Raven right there. See that it's still no spinning tech lab. He doesn't need any extra defenses against the air. It is bio. Now, I do believe that Serral mentioned that one of these games he thought there was a mech play going on. But I think that maybe was a different series. One of the previous maps. I don't think it was this one. He is responding as you would against seeing a bunch of barracks be slapped down. 1-1 should be starting soon. A couple of drones go down to the turret, actually. Am I freaking out here, or did the font change for the workers killed? Is that just the most random thing to notice? It's changed. I know the font changes between every other region in China. For whatever reason. Anywho, not very important. Creeps are being pushed out 1-1-1 on both sides. Let's see if Byun actually gets combat shields when he should. I don't know. Seems to be a problem. If I was his coach, I'd drill him on combat shields. He's got 2 auto turrets looking to harass either side of the base. I guess Byun was playing during the Abyssal Reef time for a little bit before he went to the military. Abyssal Reef was during the auto turret having, I think, a 3 cast range, right? Something like that. As well as a more abusive map for auto turrets. Now it's a 1 cast range, which is very awkward to micro. But the spore crawlers also are really in prime spots right now. So the Raven's really just doing auto turret harassment. Can get a decent amount of drone kills. Don't mistake, that's actually decent harassment, but none of them being used to clear up the creep spread. Might have been a little bit of a missed opportunity. Serral does seem to like the lane baneling Hydra on this map from what I've seen. And he's once again going into it, so we could see lurkers as well. Byun takes the opportunity to clear up a little bit of creep spread and then just backs away with his Hellbats and a lot of Marines. Combat Shields is gonna finish at a more normal time. He didn't forget it this one time around. More creep spread should be cleaned up soon. There we go. Oh no, I missed the active creep tumor. Oh, it sucks. Ah, misses the pickup as well. Oh, it must be getting late in Korea, which it definitely was. I think when this was played, it was already like midnight in Korea. Fourth CC on the way. Byun playing to the macro game like we've seen in the previous games. But against lane baneling Hydra this time, not lane baneling Muta. I think the Raven just fell. Yeah, one of the Ravens died. I heard something fall. Hydras are able to catch it. Other Raven's still alive and still harassing the left side, it looks like. And also, again, go with the main army, but the problem with the Raven, and all the people out there who are like, just build a Raven and clear up creep. Terrans are so stupid. You're stupid. Ravens are so obnoxious to control. I don't even want to say difficult, they're just obnoxious. But because Byun does play a rather quick style, I think if it's a direct push, you're gonna siege up, you're gonna chill out, you're gonna like, just kind of be in one location for a long period of time, yeah, okay, bring the Raven. But if you're gonna try and do a bunch of drops and have a moment's notice, be able to pick up on your medevacs, the Raven's gonna die. It just is. It's just slow. It's a slow unit. It did get a speed buff at one point, but it's still slow. Oh, a couple of good Widowmine hits, and then the last 2 Banelings on the left side also getting cleaned up. That was actually very fortunate right there for Byun, which means that Serral, I think usually would not have to worry about his creeps for being cleaned up. Now loses a lot of active creep tumors. There's the Raven finally contributing to clear up even more on the left side. And Serral, just anticipating how Byun would play this game, already has a little pack of units over to the right. And that's exactly where Byun is headed. So I think they understand each other, you guys. I think they actually understand this game of Starcraft. +3 starts up, but really, Serral's very quick to finishing his 2-2 at the same time that Byun finishes 2-2. He's also quick to finishing his Hive. His Hive's almost done already, so the upgrades might not be such a big difference as we're used to in TvZ, but it's also a different style that Serral is playing in a Death Aware game that really can just be stick entirely on layer-based units for quite some time. And so the upgrades really become a big issue, but a little less of the sacrificial style when you play with those Hydras, a little less of the aggressive style when you play with those Hydras that can't really get across the map most of the time unless they're really confident in doing so. You're also usually not trading out as much. You can actually get up to that Hive. Ooh, the dodge. The dodge is real. 2 medevacs escape from the bottom rights. And Serral very quickly realizing, well, of course he's going to go to the top left now. And he's right about that. Byun's trying to get back to his Widow Mines, but they have all been cleaned up. I think he's looking for a fight off of creep. Serral's not going to give him one. In fact, Serral's going to go to the bottom right. The very bottom right with the, oh, no. Okay, never mind. Almost smart enough, but not quite. Terran players definitely do the thing when they're like, well, this is an appropriate amount of space to unload away from the army. And you're like, well, it might not be. I don't know if the Zerg's actually capable of chasing it down. This is a good fight for Serral. Starts off, I guess, where Byun didn't expect him to. He was on the very edge of this ramp, and Byun did not have time to respond, did not have time to get a concave, burrow his Widow Mines, and spread them out. So he loses all of them. Not a great start to an engagement for Terran players, and then has to retreat and wait for, well, more units and probably more Widow Mines. Serral has played a lot with Ling Baneling Hydra, but is finally moving on to the Lurker Den after starting up his +3 armor, and soon his +3 attack, I guess, as well, once +1 finishes. And then Lurker Den with the upgrades. Also Pathogen Glands and Burrow, which is quite fun to see, but I don't know if we will see it. Perhaps more so. Less about the burrowed banelings, and we'll get excited about that. And more so about the burrowed infestors, because he knows that Byun is very capable of playing with ghosts, and even more likely than any other late game TvZ, ghosts would occur when you have a lurker style of play, which Byun should absolutely be anticipating, seeing as there are hydras, there are usually lurkers afterwards. Now on creep this time, but maybe not enough banelings. Trying to get into a concave. The last few banelings getting some okay connections, and with all the splitting, all the micro that went down right there, Byun actually really wasn't attacking. So the hydras, with their pretty insane DPS, were able to rip through the rest of the army that was in that concave. And once again, Byun is forced to retreat. Serral trying to take this top left base. If he gets this one, you usually get that one as well. And kind of the vice versa situation. Keeping tabs on Byun's outward expansions as well. So he's got an overload to the left, Lings over to the right, and with Burrow done, he could actually even burrow them, but he hasn't thought about it quite yet. He is focused on taking out the army on this side of the map, but off creep's always going to be a little bit questionable. When he's got lurkers, when he's got the lurker speed burrow, then he can jump on top of an army, even off of creep. But until then, oh, it's definitely more questionable to do it just this type of army. Let's go Parasitic Bomb was used and almost kills one of the medevacs, but good split away at the last second. Ooh, good split. You know what? That was actually kind of cool. You know what happened there? Not only did Serral split, let's watch it in slow motion. Let's appreciate the beauty of it. Watch this here. So not only did he split, you see him, he split, and then he was like, oh, I can kill the medevac maybe. He tried to drag the Widow Mine into the medevac. Isn't that cool? Isn't that just the fastest thing you've ever seen? And you'll never be able to replicate? Yep. A little too far away, though. I'm not sure the splash would have killed the medevac anyways, but it was still a really cool thing. Well, nice little detail. Lurkers are finally on the way. We do have +3 melee and +2 missile as Serral continues his journey to 333. The lurkers will be eventually very well upgraded. And got the range for them first. So it is range first, then burrow, unless you have a very specific timing in mind.
Apparently you are doing something right, Captain.
A little frontline army, just meant to kind of pull away the banelings. There's an act here, right? There's a beautiful dance between Bio and the Zerg army, which I'll go ahead and highlight here. So, Terran versus Zerg engagements are actually very difficult to do. Up to a certain point in, you know, our pleb leagues, we're just kind of like out macroing each other anyway, so a bunch of Marines steamroll over not enough banelings and vice versa. When it comes to actual pros and the way they engage into each other, it's kind of cool. It's a lot of actions, though. A lot of actions. See? There's many actions. Many's. Alright, but anyways, so the Zerg player doesn't want to send everything forward, because they might get popped by a couple of Widow Mines. The Terra player also doesn't want to send everything forward, because ideally you want a concave. So Byun's quite good. You'll see him do this a lot of the time, but he's quite good at like pushing a force forward, looking to either suck the Zerg AI back into his concave, because that'll happen when they're not paying attention, or he's looking to get the Baneling AI to crash inefficiently against the Marauders. So it's literally a dance of tiny sections of units. In this case, the Terran army kind of lost that dance because the Lurkers messed it up. Blame the Lurkers. They were able to control the creep spread, and then once he was forced to run away, your army clumps up, to run away in a clump, and then to concave after the clump means that you're not attacking the entire time you're running away, right? Which gives the lurkers opportunity to run forward. You try and go back into a concave, that's when the banelings off creep, go in a single line. It's not too efficient. For the Zerg player, the Terran army tries to stand its ground, take out those banelings if it can, but then also has to be very aware of the lurkers and their terrifying spines with the increased range. More Wood Mines join on the fray, though, and that is quite a few Wood Mines that are not taken out. The banelings had all died, so they couldn't take out the clump of Wood Mines off to the left side, and that's actually a big concave. The Terran army, the reinforcements coming at the perfect time, but maybe not enough. He scanned, he saw the number of lurkers, and he looked at his concave and said, you know what, I think I could do this, but I think he would have been able to if it was only the lurkers. It wasn't only the lurkers. Lings and banelings are coming from the left side, so Serral's reinforcements, now being the Kingmaker, is going to be able to push through on top of this planetary, take it out, and then perhaps even continue the push. Another lovely dance of TvZ right there. First it looked like Serral was going to win, then reinforcements came in, it looked like Byun was going to win, and then reinforcements came in, and then it looked like Serral was going to win, which he indeed did, and struck quite a blow to Byun's economy. He actually quite needed that base, as he was not expanding twice, like he was on the, what's that map called? Lightshade, there we go, Lightshade map. I don't know why I had the term Frost Pillar in my map. I don't know, in my name, I don't know why I was thinking of that. But anyways, that game, he was expanding, so if he had occasionally did have to lift up a base or let a base die, it wasn't the end of the world. He actually really did need that 5th base. This, quote-unquote, 6th, potentially, did not come down very fast at all. So Byun still maxed out, still with time to get this base back up and running and perhaps grab the bottom right bases. Still need to make sure not to take any foolish engagements. Serral has been on a few bases for quite a while, very safely, in fact, not losing any drones in this game, it feels like. So he has quite a bank to use, and he also has very efficient units at this point, too. The Lurker's not really dying any time. Vipers are dying, at least one of them gets picked off, but the Blinding Cloud saves the other one and forces Byun to retreat. At this point, Byun is trying to both push and defend from this area, so he doesn't really ever want to give it up. You know, if he's going to swing his entire army over to the right side of the map, it's going to take a long time to do, and he's going to leave his planetary basically defenseless. You know, planetary is not supposed to be defenseless, but sometimes it is. Sometimes just way too many banelings, and that is the case right here, right now. The banelings are going to crash into the bio army. In fact, they're going to just force the bio army to lift up. And while the Wood Mines would have gotten some fantastic hits, potentially, the Lurkers and Overseers did quick work over there, meaning the planetary is indeed going to fall. And that was with Byun actually trying to protect it. He did have a portion of his army off to the right side, but that looked like it was going to be enough. I think it was a problem of Micro not having his concave, not having protection of his Wood Mines, and Serral, again, tearing apart Byun's economy. Maybe he could have given up the 1/5. I don't think he could have given up that other base. I think that's close to the nail in the coffin, unless Byun can go some Super Saiyan shit and start really dealing equal damage to Serral. Not starting off too well. Lots of Marauders actually getting caught by Lings. And here comes the entire Zerg army. Spellcasters, including a nasty parasitic bomb on top of the Medivacs, forcing Byun to entirely retreat back to no minefields, very few reinforcing units. He gets the last second split off of that creep, but if the Banelings aren't going to kill him, the Lurkers probably will. And here they come. This orbital is a necessity. He can't just let this go, but his last stand is truly going to be his last stand. He's down 80 supply. He's up against Lurkers that I don't think he can take on. And he's got nothing else going for him. He's got an orbital to the top left, which Lings are going to easily clean up. A quick lift off, sure. That means no mining, and Byun is now down overall 70, 80 supply and 30 supply down in the army against very, very good units. This isn't just lane baneling. I hope one of mine hits it. This is also Lurkers. There's also Vipers occasionally. You don't get lucky against this type of army, I don't think. As long as the Zerg is paying attention, not letting their Lurkers be left alone, which Serral has not done. Banelings rolling in, clearing up the Wood Mines, clearing up even the Marauders. Why not? And the Lurkers are going to tear down that orbital. SCVs being pulled into Lurkers is a terrible sign. It's absolutely terrible, and it did not work out. GG. Serral brings it to game 5. Like we know he can. Thank you, Hurt One, for the 18 months. Game 5, Serral Byun is the best. I avoided shouting you out so we could keep it secret. Thank you, Haplo and Dogs, for the 11-month resub. Yes, this series does go into Game 5. Anytime the best players are out 3-0 is a sad day for Starcraft, so I'm glad. The concluding game to a pretty amazing series already. Rumors are that Game 5 between Byun and Serral is one of the best games of the year. That's the rumor. We'll see if it holds up. In the bottom right of Romanticide, he is the red Zerg and says Serral. We even got a little hype train going in the background. In the top left, as the blue Terran, he is Byun. Famous for winning a BlizzCon teamless as well as a GSL teamless. Very funny setup. Byun, this guy who came up after being kind of retired. I mean, it's always weird when it comes to StarCraft retirements. People say they're retired, they don't actually retire, they come back shortly after. People don't say they're retired, it's a little more real, but occasionally just pop up again, why not? Byun came back from apparently not playing StarCraft 6 years ago, to playing at a bunch of online tournaments, to being one of the only guys to face Zerg at the beginning of Legacy of the Void and do it well. Still never grabbing a team, abusing Reapers, forcing them to be nerfed, abusing the 2-1-1, still teamless. He's up against Jin Air Green Wings, like SOS? I forget actually who he faced. But one of Jin Air's players. And this guy who just is like, I mean, the context of things, it's like a peasant story, you know? Like the monarchy is there, the Jin Air Greenwind's family is there, and this little like snot-nosed little peasant comes up and is like, I'll take you on. And they kind of scoff with their beautifully etched blacksmith swords, and they go, you can't do anything to me, peasants. And Byun has his like little like pole with no like fanciness to it whatsoever. And he's like, I think I can beat you. And you know what he did? He did beat them. And it was actually quite a beautiful story. Beautiful picture when Jin Air Green Wings is all in like the little cube thing they have when it comes to the GSL matches on the outside stage. The boxes, and they're all in there discussing strategy, being, you know, the most decorated team of StarCraft 2. GSL champions, plural, helping out their guy, and then it pans over to Byun, and he's just like looking at his nails, just waiting, doing nothing. He's not only doesn't have a team, there's not even like a friend that comes in and helps him. It's, especially back then, so this was like 4 years ago, it was like this really stark contrast. Obviously now Jin Air has been disbanded, which is quite sad news, but even before this actual disbandment of the team, it was already at a point where it was like, well, you know, they're mostly moved out of the team house, and the Kespa era really is truly over. Well, 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't over. It was so fresh in people's minds, and it really did seem like the team house was the superior method. There's a reason that everyone on Jin Air was doing so well. And then Byun came in and was like, no, fuck that. It's a great story. And then I guess kind of a similar narrative here, right? This kid Serral from Finland. I mean, who even knows what Finland is? Is it a real country? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. He comes in, starts playing well in the foreigner circuit, and then goes up against the Koreans. Again, a bunch of Koreans, the powerhouses of StarCraft 2, many of them coming from Brood War and Kespa teams, so legacies upon legacies, and they're all putting their heads together trying to figure out how to beat this kid in the first GSL versus the world, and Serral's like, yeah, whatever. I guess I'll beat them. That's actually kind of a cool parallel between the two, actually. They both have surpassed expectations and broken barriers in slightly different ways. But anywho, as important as narrative building is, there's also a game afoot. So Byun has gone for a different opener this time around. We saw the fusion core on the screen. Let's talk about it. A battlecruiser is on the way. No doubt into bio with the battlecruiser here. To probably just one battlecruiser then. It usually is. One battlecruiser, bio. 3, 4 battlecruisers, mech, right? So I expect only this one to pop out. And no Yamato either. A lot of Hellions have been made, sure, which can be a little bit scary for the Zerg player to deal with, but so far so good for Serral's defenses. I think this battlecruiser could have been a big surprise. He did get a little bit of scouting done, but did not see the fusion core. So this battlecruiser could get a couple of queens dead. Pops into the natural. Doesn't find any success. Instant pull away with the drones. Two finally go down in the main. Generally, when it comes to these battlecruiser openers, I would say that the deadlier thing is the distraction. The battlecruisers distract. They need to be paid attention to, no doubt about it. It's not like you can just completely forget the battlecruiser exists. No, but they distract, so the Hellions get in as the queens and lings are too, busy doing other things. The Hellions get in, kill a couple of drones. Suddenly you've taken damage, and it's not because a big old battlecruiser is flying over your head. But so far, Serral has only taken damage, and a little bit of damage at that, from the battlecruiser. The Hellions have been dealt with well enough. He's spreading creep, he's getting his drones, he's getting his spire, and he's breaking down these rocks, which is very important on Romanticide. Finland sounds pretty made up to me. I know, right? Exactly. Just like Australia isn't real, and birds also aren't real. It's my favorite internet meme. So it is just the one battlecruiser. Now, I think, this is where it gets awkward, right? So I think Serral thought it was mech this game. So it's a bit of a mistake. So he's like, I guess at so the Roach War just canceled. So the Spire being made is a fine enough build against a bio player after a single battlecruiser. But here's the thing. If you're up against bio, you can deal with a singular battlecruiser with queens. You don't have to build the Spire first and foremost. So I think if Serral 100% knew what was actually happening, which apparently he should have, but then derped, he probably wouldn't have gotten the Spire first. He would have gotten 1-1 first, like he's been doing in the previous games. But the extra thing that really says, like, oh, he messed up, like he made a mistake, was that the Roach Warren was built and then canceled. He thought it would be more battlecruisers. He thought it'd be a mech build. He was incorrect. Now, he kind of adapts quickly. He cancels the Roach Warren. He builds mutas, not corruptors. He starts up his upgrades. It still looks kind of like a usual build, a faster Spire build as opposed to faster upgrades. But certainly there was a interruption, an otherwise, perfect build we would expect from Serral, and his mind space wasn't correct either, which can be very impactful as a Zerg player. He is absolutely prepared for this attack. He's got tons of Banelings. He needs them because he's going to go off of creep without that speed. It's about 20 seconds away, 10 seconds away. He does end up cleaning it up almost entirely, and the mutas do grab 8 SCVs. So as awkward as that moment was, the whole, oh shit, it's bio, wait a second. Serral really did figure it out, realize his mistake quick enough to make this look like actually a very, very good start for Serral. That was a lot of Ling Baneling he had to make to defend against that, sure, but it was also a lot of bio that eventually was cleaned up. He still keeps his 4th base alive. He's got his creep spread going. His mutas are alive, and they kill at SCVs. It actually sounds kind of fabulous for a Zerg player. Once again, going to break down the rocks. I'm not sure if Byun is really thinking about abusing tanks. He has built tanks before on the Lightshade game, but he is well into Wood of Mines already here. And Wood of Mines don't abuse this position as much as tanks would. But it is still important to tear it down. Muta count now up to 11. Make that 12. Okay, back down to 11. Make that 10. Okay, he's back up to 10. He's got +1 on the way, as well as for his ground army. And he's got a 5th base as well. So as you saw, didn't really get to mention it, but it is the way that Zerg players play now against Terran. is that you will take this base as the third, get that creep spread started, and then also get a running start over to this fourth hatchery, which is quite nice. And then, when you've secured that, you have actually a very nice and secure fifth base, because it's very, very unlikely, not that great for, micro. It's not very good for the Terran player to wrap around this entire left side of Romana side to hit this base. It's not gonna happen. So, creep, fourth, safe fifth. Makes a lot of sense to take that base. So the usual problems of this map for a Terran player, grabs the one medevac, nicely done. One of the big problems for this map as a Terran player is not necessarily your expansion process. It's a macro map. You know, the expansions are not the safest ever. They're not Proxima Station, but they are pretty close to home. So it's not really too big of a jump to get to your fourth, get to your fifth, and leave into your sixth, which is right above each other. I would say the biggest problem on this map is actually keeping track of where the Zerg is coming in. So run-bys can be quite deadly. You know, run-bys to this top little hallway that you're not going to be using to attack into your opponent can be unscouted. So that's why Widow Mines are up here. And then as you move through this middle, there's even, I would say, like another pathway if they go across over here and around. That can be annoying until you get the planetary. The planetary does stop it, but I'm talking about 3 bases if your supply depots are down. But Byun, not really playing too aggressive off those 3 bases. A couple of attacks here and there, but then mostly waiting for his max out right now. Isn't worrying about run-bys so much. He's cleared up the right side. He's got planetary on the left. Run-bys have to be a very serious run-by. Banelings included to actually tear that down. And so far, so good. A little surprised by the Banelings. That's kind of the funny thing about those interactions. The Zerg player kind of gets found. It's like a deer in the headlights thing where their Ling Baneling is found. But then they're like, well, what if the Terran player isn't paying attention? So they try and run the Banelings into the Marines. And sometimes it works, actually. In that case, Byun was able to pull back. He's got a battlecruiser, once again, harassing the bases. Also getting a little bit of scouting. I think it's actually a nice undervalued thing about having a battlecruiser. Is that when it jumps on top of a base to get things started, it also does some scouting. And it is always annoying for the Zerg player to have to bring back their air army to deal with it. Although Queens could also deal with this thing. It's quite injured. I think it teleported it in, so it's not going to be able to teleport out. Got to find a little corner. Another base goes down. I think he just killed an Overseer, so it sees the progression. There's clearly a macro game underway. Finally, the battlecruiser gets cleared up by the Mutas, which, by the way, are about to have +2 flyer attack. Already on the way to Hive. It's already done. So Adrenal Glands, +3 Carapace. Serral perhaps going to be adding in Ultras this game. He wasn't so quick to do it on Death Aura. But that wasn't, that game he didn't really have quite as big of an economy. So it actually, despite looking one-sided, I think towards the end, that Death Aura game was actually kind of a close battle. This game, I think Serral's a little more confident. He's gotten up to 80+ workers on all these bases. Plus he has a big economy, although the big bank, rather, it was mostly minerals. He's actually going to pull the trigger on the Baneling attack. The Muta's coming back to try and join in. A couple of fantastic Widow Mine shots really popping off there. Lots of Banelings going down. Even one last one on top of the Widow Mines means that Byun was like, should I? Can I continue forward? But I think he does still have to retreat. That's what he was already planning on doing, or waiting for reinforcements at the very least. And with all the Widow Mines actually dying, they got fantastic shots, but they did all die. He's going to have to be very careful about how he approaches moving into creep again. And I wasn't sure that Serral was going to do that because his Mutas were harassing this base over here. Eventually cleaned up. Missile turrets now being put down. 3 of them. It's a pretty good number, but not enough to actually defend against the Mutas. Probably some Marines helped out too. I didn't think he'd do it without pulling the Mutas back. He did manage to push it back for now. And the Mutas, well, they eventually came back, tried to help out a little bit, so they are probably better off going doing other things, like stopping this left side base, which he just scouted with a couple of Lings, and now is going to get the kill on all the missile turrets and perhaps even the command center. Byun is going to race back with a couple of units, but actually mostly Marauders. They do not help that much against Mutas. So I'm not sure that's going to be saved. Meanwhile, Byun also trying to encroach on this hatchery. He's trying to get rid of creep tumors one at a time, and the Queens are trying to replace them, but actually the Queen's also going down this time. Maybe he can finally make some headway, but oh, that is so many Banelings crashing in. Byun, perhaps not thinking he was really going to do it, is now forced to retreat with the last few little instances of his Marines. The last couple. And the reinforcements come in after helping out, quote unquote, with the mutas. They really didn't. The mutas cleared everything up. I mean, now Byun is back on the offensive. He's looking almost desperate to engage here, but he did take out most of the banelings. The Ling muta is still going to be plenty against the very not AoE army. No AoE until literally just now, and then no Marines either. If Marauders get totally encompassed by Lings, they don't die fast, they also don't kill fast. And that's kind of the weird problem between the two units. The tug of war has ceased. I think Byun was a little bit over-eager. I mean, he really did look a little bit desperate to move in. You know, he was kind of sending his units in one by one, almost like in a single line, as opposed to having that nice concave a Terran player would want, trying to use his momentum against the Zerg player who was maybe running out of creep, maybe running out of banelings, and wasn't quite able to do so. Byun also had just lost the command center entirely after trying to defend it, but unsuccessfully doing so. It was a more awkward opportunity there, more awkward time for Byun than it was for Serral, who, you know, now has happily saved this base while having this base and now moving on to yet another base. So it seems like a very good time for Serral. Despite the supplies being even and the bank's not really growing out of control for either player, I think momentum has definitely shifted over into Serral's favor, especially as his creep spread is still replaced. Like, I think Byun killed 3 queens. But it looks like Serral was able to find a couple more to spread out the creep in the middle. Mutas, maybe not in the best numbers. 15 with +2. Still, you know, definitely kills SCVs, right? Won't kill that planetary, the would-be planetary that fast. That is this time saved. And Byun is once again pushing to the very top right now. That's a little less creep spread here. Also a little less of a concave for Serral to use. In fact, he has to kind of go through a choke. We don't see this dynamic too often in this matchup on Romanticide. We've seen it a couple times in PvP. But, oh, well, chokes no longer an issue as Serral comes in with the rest of his army from the left as well, taking out the Wood Mines, but now off of creep as Byun's reinforcements appears. Serral's going to try and take out the last few Marines on the north side, which he will do, but as he tries to retreat, the last few Banelings get popped off by the Marauder slow. And Byun, I think, yeah, he's going to scan ahead. I was going to say, he has momentum. He's got the opportunity. Serral, over-engaged, I think. Initially looked fine, but then as the reinforcements came in, that's when it became questionable. And even losing his mutas. I mean, they will find an orbital for the time being, but again, going to be forced to run away. Serral trying to buy some time for more Ling Baneling. He would eventually be able to clean this up. The hatchery still falls, and now he's going to clean up, I would assume. But Byun was able to scan ahead and take the opportunity. There's also another kind of weird thing that's happening, I think, for the Zerg's perspective here for a second. It's like, oh, well, just hold on a second, I guess. We might actually have an engagement. It's like, actually, Serral moving in. He doesn't have any Banelings. I'm surprised he tries to do this. There's like 2, 3 Banelings in that? Okay, all right. I think it's wise of him to pull back. But anyways, the kind of awkward thing about the Zerg engagement with this type of army that Byun has been showing us, a lot of Marauders, right, is that when the Banelings are allowed to do whatever they want to do, they will go off on the Marauders inefficiently. And they won't even kill them because Marauders can tank a lot of Banelings. So that's also, like, it's one of the reasons you would include Marauders in the late game, because you can afford them, first of all, with all the bases that you have, so you can afford 4 at a time. But also so they can tank a couple of Banelings. They add a real depth to the army, a real tankiness to the army, and of course they help out more against the Ultras than the Marines would do. Which this game we actually have Ultras. Chitinous Plating is finished up. They got the little speed wings on their backs. We also know that speed is finished up. It's the dumbest graphical upgrade, but I guess it does show what it wants, doesn't it? Medias are trying to get some economic damage done. Oh, they find a completely open SCV line, so they are definitely getting some damage done. But I think they're also trying to force Byun away from the direct fights, but then at the same time, Byun also looking to distract Serral and take out his economy. He has a tiny little drop off to the bottom side. It's basically dead anyways, and it will be cleaned up. The Ultra coming in might be a little bit of an overkill, but it will be cleaned up. It looks like Byun is starting to make headway over to the right side. He's cleared up a lot of creep, even more creep tumors going down. He's always got this choke to run back from the Zerg army, which is exactly what he does. The Marauders on the front side taking a lot of Baneling shots, that one Marauder even being basically an immortal living 5 ever. And the Ling Baneling Ultra is really struggling. The numbers aren't plentiful enough. This is where Mutas actually I think would be quite helpful. Not with the Wood Mines. No, not that Wood Mine right there, but the Wood Mine field there, but on the front lines, they can help take out those Marauders. Instead, the mutas are being used to clear up, once again, a very open, defenseless SCV line, which is not a bad use of them whatsoever, but that is kind of the trick. Like, mutas, as time goes on, can oftentimes be less of an issue in TvZ. Absolutely, that can happen, but also the reverse can happen. 30 mutas can actually be very helpful for these main engagements, but you know what's also helpful? Widow Mines! Another fantastic Widow Mine hit right in the center of that Zerg army, took out a lot of Ling Baneling, and Byun, feeling confident, scans ahead, moves his Widow Mines ahead, and is now on mostly off of creep. He's going to happily take this fight. A couple Banelings do get some decent connections, clear up some of those Widow Mines, but Serral is running low on fodder units. He's running low on units that actually protect those Ultras. When they come in single file, okay, the Bio Army definitely kills every single Ultra here. They need some Lings, they need some Banelings, and again, maybe even Mutas, right? At this point, the Mutas are still mostly worried about dealing damage to the economy. They keep finding a very open mineral line, so more power to them. More SCVs go down, but keep in mind that Byun is on a lot of command centers. He actually has a lot of orbitals as well, and while these mules aren't necessarily doing the best job mining, in general he has plenty of energy to spend on mules. So Serral is getting some decent damage done, but if he were to lose control of this base, it would have been a bit better for Byun. In fact, while he didn't lose the base, he certainly lost control of it, only just getting back to mining, only just getting the very bottom left base up and running too. Maybe something he could have done earlier on. It's currently 21 minutes in the game, and there's been quite the slugfest. Serral has creep spread that is going to save his middle bases, and that's nice, but he has lost all of his creep spread to the top right and never really got the bottom left going. So that very important factor of being a Zerg player, mostly gone for the bases that will become increasingly more important as we delve into 25, 30 minutes. They'll become very, very important. This base doesn't even have mining anymore. It's hardly important. I guess it's a larva factory at this point. Serral now using Lings to try and get on top of this orbital. It's also an important orbital for Byun, who's also starting to run out of minerals in his main 4 bases. Nice Widow Mine shot to help clean this up, and eventually the Lings will be cleaned up. Byun also doing a drop to the very bottom left, finds the base, and it's 6 drones, it looks like, while also taking up this middle base, which I said wasn't too important, but could have been nice for larva, and it also could be the start of the domino effect. You don't want to lose 1 base, because you could lose 2, you could lose 3, it could just be the start of a really bad game, but it looks like in this case, Byun is going to respect Serral's army, and is going to just back away into the much more freebie of this base. Like, that is a freebie. Reaching into the natural would have been a little bit too much there. The bottom left drop is finally cleaned up. Medevac should also go down. The muta count has been partially rebuilt, I guess. I'm trying to press the U button, and it's not. I guess my keyboard got disconnected, so that's beautiful. That's fine. We already got what we wanted here anyways. But yeah, the muta count looks like it was rebuilt a little bit. Has been helping out with the dealing with the drops, now helping out with the main engagements. Byun forced to lift off, but the Widow Mine helping to splash and damage those medevacs means that they're ripe for the picking for the mutas, and that was a good cleanup right there. Byun's retreat was very, very sloppy indeed. Serral's able to take full opportunity of the combined forces of his army. Ling, Baneling, Ultra, Muta really coming in here to take off these bases. It would be a lovely base to crack, as it would be an orbital plus 2 fresh command centers, but that is a lot of Widow Mines on the backside, and he saw them burrow as well, so he's not going to go for it. Widow Mines being cleaned up while they can. I do actually kind of want to fix my keyboard. But I'm so hyped up in the moment, I don't want to pause. As I do think the muta count's going to become important. By the way, those mutas are on +3 attack and +1 armor. So they're really quite good mutas, I dare say. You don't see them that upgraded that often, but in the past, you actually would. Like in Heart of the Swarm, you would see it all the time. Well, fuck it. Mouse only. Can I even pause without my keyboard? That's a good point. I don't think I can. Byun has a good army once again. They're both maxed out. But, you know, Byun's army is always going to be bigger. He has less SCVs. He needs less SCVs. This fight's going to be quite awkward. He's around the bend, through a choke, and Serral was coming in from all different directions, but is it going to turn around? Is Byun actually going to be able to hold against the Ultras? I think he will. No more fodder available, so he's just going to back off of creep. He's already off of creep, but he's going to back even further, up into a ramp if need be. Wasn't even necessary. Serral recognized the weaknesses of the Ultras, said, okay, I took a decent engagement, let's just leave it at that. Returned back to a defensive setup, my own creep spread. Maybe defend this base, but it looks like he's not very confident about doing so. Serral's always had a decent mineral bank, but never able to get up that gas bank has been a major problem, especially as he loses the middle base and is going to lose mining on the bottom left. Serral once again getting some damage done into this middle base, which just seems to be a constant point of vulnerability for Byun, as more SCVs go down. But Byun at 50 SCVs, plus however many orbitals he has, still actually has a very good economy. Well, I shouldn't say very good. He has a decent enough economy for the trades he's been getting. Hatchery does finally go down to the same drop. It just came back in, sniped it, got away, and this time it's supported by the army. This isn't just the drop, and is Serral overextending? Maybe it's a little scary. He doesn't have any banelings. The Lings are kind of caught up on the SCVs, and some of his army is over to the right side. Again, Lings getting into the vulnerable orbital command center, and perhaps on top of this bio wouldn't be too bad. Looks like we have a random command center in the middle of the map for some reason. Yep, that's what we have. That's what happens. They still have the battle cruiser now that died to mutas a while ago. Serral also, I think, very low on queens. So he has to kind of, in this situation, it's very easy to forget where your queens are and how many queens you have. So you're occasionally injecting, I suppose, but you have so many hatcheries to keep track of, maybe you aren't. And then you're not actually keeping track of your creep spread. This attack on this base might have been a little overzealous, as the Lings might still be alive, but the mutas have all died, and I'm not sure giving away all the mutas was quite worth there because they didn't have to be there. The Lings, I think, could have done the same thing without losing all of their muta buddies. And now Serral is down to 0 mutas. I say that confidently when not having access to the units tab. Good enough. Another scan on this would-be hatchery. I think Serral might just cancel that. He's not quite ready to defend it. Oh, maybe he is, actually. He's getting more banelings. This is a very awkward place to go in through for both sides. He's gonna find Widowmine's trying to retreat to that choke and get a couple free kills. Okay, maybe not as many as he should have. Now going back in to try and get those free kills. Serral really wants to defend this base, but keep in mind that this is also not exactly the best base, as the gas is entirely gone, and that's what's been limiting Serral in a lot of these circumstances. The base taking shots, might go down. Serral's gonna try and get more of a wraparound. He realizes he can't go through the chokes. He's gonna come in from a couple other directions, but does he have enough banelings? The banelings mostly colliding in on top of those marauders. The rest of the bio free to fire far into a concave, far off of creep, and that is going to be the loss of the hatchery. Serral desperately wanted to push that back, but maybe was better off trying to just hold the line. I guess at the same time, an orbital gets destroyed by cracklings. Maybe 2 orbitals got destroyed by cracklings. They are definitely fully upgraded, so they are quite scary. And Byun never got building armor, which wouldn't help against banelings, but does help against those cracklings. He has also been tight on cash. Serral had a mineral bank a while ago, but it's certainly gone by now. Serral now adding in some infestors. I mean, I don't think this is because he anticipates ghosts, right? That might have been the case in the last game because he saw ghosts in the first game. This time around, I do think that he's starting to accrue a gas bank, funnily enough. Now he's on a mineral bank, he's got gas. And that he wants to just stop the army so that the Ultras can do what they should. In an ideal world, the Zerg army always has Lings to get the wraparound to stop the bio army from running away. But that is quite costly, where if a fungal could do the same thing, plus the infestor lives, right? Then obviously that's going to be the better bargain. So I don't mind that whatsoever, but actually getting the fungals should be difficult. Should be. Yeah. There we go. I fix. Fantastic. So now we can check the other things. Upgrades have stayed the same mostly. I mean, production tab has all been in the units because they're so desperately trying to both defend and attack multiple locations. Byun now not just taking out the bottom left away from Serral's control, he's actually taking it as his own command center, a jumping off point for his continued destruction of Serral's bases to the right side as well. Very scary for Serral to let that opportunity go to let that part of the map go isn't just a base he desperately needs to mine from. It's also the army just right there. Right there. That's scary. An infestor is burrowed. A couple of infestors are burrowed, but Jan has been pretty good about looking for these in the past. A drop to the top right. No, double liberator to the top right, plus a drop, actually. Might be very deadly, as Serral is very quick to respond, though. Very quick. Putting down the spore crawlers, but there's the scan. Good eyes again from Byun. Definitely better on this white terrain, for sure, but it's still impressive to see it. Because they haven't, I don't believe they've shown themselves until that scan. Double liberator is gonna get cleaned up. One of them was already cleaned up or moved somewhere else. Yeah, I guess moved somewhere else. But that is a lot of lost mining when Serral desperately needs the minerals. A single fungal goes down on quite a few marauders. A costly loss. Marauders are kind of expensive, but I think it was traded out almost equally with an ultra getting popped off. Liberator is finally gonna get cleaned up. Finally. Queen's even coming along for the ride. They're like, we're gonna help? Well, it kind of helped. Drones go back to mining, which Serral really needs. He is getting awfully thin. The minerals here, mostly gone. Gas entirely gone. Minerals here, basically entirely gone. Gas, still going strong, I guess. But unlike High Templars, which are fantastic units because they morph into Archons, right? Infestors are kind of the best use for your gas. And maybe Vipers, I guess, as well, right? But Infestors, I think, are the best use of gas for Zerg. So, and they're not really that helpful. They are entirely supporting spellcasters. When they had infested Terrans, maybe you could make an argument otherwise, but they are entirely a supporting caster. Anywho, Serral's gonna try and just kind of sneak this base in the middle. He's been doing a great job of denying it from Byun, so I guess it's kind of still relatively healthy to the rest of the map. We're almost getting out to a mined out scenario, so. Relatively healthy. Either a new Liberator or another one comes in to once again distract, but it wasn't even on top of the drone, so just looking to move the Spore Crawlers, then he moves away to the right side. Very intentional, I believe, right there. Hatchery goes down, but it's a... I mean... It is an important one, but it's such a... It's almost already gone. And this base will also be cleaned up, so that's going to be it for all the gas mining for Serral, but he's got plenty. Actually remaking the mutas, and the mutas fly by, reveal themselves, so Byun, not that he can do much about it. I mean, maybe he could add a couple missile turrets. He does have minerals now that he's gotten this bottom left base up, but otherwise it's just more of like keeping those in mind. Maybe figuring out, is Serral going to try and base race me more often, do more counterattacks, but yeah. A Ghost Academy comes down at 32 minutes. Talking about supporting cast, I guess the Ghost would help against the Ultras. So far, the micro of his bio has been doing a great job, but... drones going down, I think maybe they were on the long distance mining, that's not what happened. Byun apparently doesn't know about this base. He sees a bit of creep, but that's about it. He's not thinking that it is a base, he maybe even thinks it's just creep spread if he even sees it. Serral is going to find it very difficult to actually break this engagement. This is where I believe Lambo started to kind of shout, you know, Broodlord, 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 and I absolutely agree. A couple of Broodlords would help dislodge. Now, a couple of Broodlords aren't exactly a fighting force. 5 Broodlords, though, I think are enough for the Terran to take it seriously, especially because Widow Mines do splash back. We all know this. You kind of have to lift all your Widow Mines, run back, and then try and hope the Broodlords are caught out of position. So they'd be able to at least take out the Widow Mines to a degree. They'd certainly help take care of the Marauders, which can't shoot up. And if you have enough of a supporting ground army, the Marines won't get close enough to slaughter the Broodlords like you would be afraid. So yeah, even 5 Broodlords, which he could afford if he made them literally right now, would be helpful. But oh my god, okay, well, speaking of potential counters to Broodlords, Ghosts would have been... could be if Broodlords ever make it in, but they are not. Nuda is actually getting demolished by the snipe, so the first thing that scouts the Ghosts. Very unfortunate there. Honestly, even without the surprise snipe, Serral just clearly wasn't expecting Ghosts, wasn't paying attention to his mutas at that exact time. Even without the snipes, Ghosts aren't that bad against mutas. They are surprisingly tanky. We kind of consider them more along the lines of Marines for some reason, but they're actually more along the lines of Marauders. And they actually have really decent DPS. So, I have disgracefully gone mass ghosts in the past. And I can tell you that mutas are not the answer to them. Some poor guy on a Hana, I think. Or Catalina, actually, I think it was. Made 30 mutas to my ghosts and got destroyed. Anywho. Now, mutas are going to find trouble here because now, not only can they not engage on top of the ghosts because they're actually kind of effective against them, but every time they try to retreat, every time they go, oh fuck, there's ghosts, they're going to die to the snipes. And only a perfect combination of retreat plus fungal growth would stop them from dying. Which is actually very tricky for Serral to do. I would go with the old cliche of anyone could do it, Serral could. I actually don't think he can because it's not something you practice very often. If ghosts against muta and fungal against ghosts was actually the common thing today in the meta, I think he could do it. But he's, you know, I don't think your key bindings are prepared for this. You're like, where do I want this unit? On what key group? What am I doing? Ghosts have in the past been a strong response to late game Zerg, so it's not that Serral's unfamiliar with them. Definitely the opposite. There's a time there where TvZ was always super late game. Never forget, I am Katowice 2019. Serral innovation. But I think you'd have to reacquaint yourself with that style. Things have calmed down a little bit as they both get maxed out. Serral just desperately trying to get a base up and running and then also not take any engagements, because if he takes engagements, they could go poorly. If they go poorly, he doesn't have a bank to make up for said engagement. Long distance mining while he can. Base was found out with a scan, killed, easy peasy. Beyond even looking to use those ghosts to EMP the infestors, which is definitely another... Oh god, oh jeez. Whoa, that's a lot of mutas. That's a lot of mutas to lose. I don't think it's worth taking those out. Very close to take out the missile turrets, but not quite. The mass repair was just too good. And this is again without building armor. No building armor, no high sec auto tracking. Just good old-fashioned SCV repair. That's too bad too, actually, because if that's a domino effect right there. If this one goes down, this one goes down, these two definitely go down easily. And then you have suddenly 2 command centers gone. Plus a Ghost Academy. You know, why not? It's not a great sign in this type of game to see your opponent building a command center. It's not good. If that was an orbital, he'd be like, oh, he probably just lifted his main. No, not this case. He's gonna try and take the engagement. A couple of fungals coming out, actually catching the ghost. Actually a fairly good fungal. Double fungal, triple fungal. Catching a lot of those ghosts. These ones in the back line's gonna try and get the snipes, so they can't. The mutas actually, I think, target firing them right there, are now gonna go on top of the Liberators. Serral at this point trying to ram his entire army through a tiny choke, which usually goes very poorly for the Zerg player, is actually able to get on top of this ramp into the Terran bases, and that is most of the ground army gone. A lot of Byun's supplies currently in medevacs and widow mines that are littered around the map. Command Center is able to finish just in the nick of time, but it might still go down to the air units. Widow mines apparently are going to live as there's no overseer, and while the medevacs, a lot of them died, a decent amount still survive. We are down into sub 100 supply right now, and I'm just gonna go over that fight once again, because I thought that was a very interesting fight. Funnily enough, I believe at this point, Serral actually thought he was just giving the game away. I actually think Serral was like, fuck it, I'm dead, whatever, let's just do this. But a couple things happen, right? So maybe he takes the engagement because he's like, fuck it, whatever. The ghosts are also kind of vulnerable. I don't think the ghosts... If the ghosts had just kept retreating, maybe they actually get the snipes, but they trying to snipe here means they get fungal. So it's like, okay, hold on. All right, wait a second. Entirely off of creep. Mostly ultras. Doesn't feel so good sometimes as a Zerg player against the might of the bio army, but... especially when you're about to head into a choke, but he's caught Byun retreating more than attacking, so maybe. And then here are the snipes I was talking about. The snipes are trying to come down on this ultra, it looks like. Look at the Starcraft, it's beautiful. And I think these mutas are trying to individually target them. Maybe not, actually. It could have just been a glaive worm. I did hear one snipe go down. But did another one? Yeah, only one went down. I don't know if the Ling touched them. They are such fragile. They're not even fragile. It's not the right word. They give up easily. That's what ghosts do. But only one went down. So you have like 4 ghosts that could have been sniping. Anyways, this is still not an ideal scenario for Zerg, is it? It's not. The Zerg is going through a choke against the concave of Bio fully upgraded with Medivacs healing it. Doesn't seem like it's going to go that well. But with more retreating having to be done, with the concave still not in place, there's a lot of not attacking happening from Byun. So it looks like a very like, well, fuck it, whatever, I don't care, ultra throw moment. This is where ultras are infamous for throwing. It actually turns into an even engagement. Unfortunately for Serral, even was not going to be good enough. And now that's kind of it. I was like, I'm getting confused as to what speed I'm on. There we go. There we go. That's the normal speed for Starcraft. The planetary or command center does go down. Bio army is dead, but Byun still has the bottom left base stunned. And what really is the kicker of this endgame is that if Serral had actually killed these missile turrets, I do believe this base falls. If this base falls, that's a planetary, can't be lifted. This is the only base. Okay, he's got his main and natural that could be lifted over. Still very vulnerable bases. Because I think not only does the orbital fall, but the planetary falls too. And maybe a couple Lings stop that from mining. If it's not mining, Byun is literally mining from this, and that's it. They're like kind of on equal mining, but Byun's actually on 1.5 bases mining. Yeah, 1.5 bases mining. And he's also on these cheaper units. I mean, Serral could try and dance around, do things with Ling Bane, Ling Muta, and that can be a very effective scenario. Very effective army type. Oh, God. When you're paying attention to it, if this is Archon mode, they are very effective units, but even the snipes being still that major problem where you can't retreat for them. If you accidentally find the ghosts and aren't prepared to just kill them, you're going to take damage from them. Yeah, I think it was the glaive worm that interrupted the snipes. I think I mentioned it, but maybe I just thought it. Regardless, Byun just needed a good enough engagement. It was a haphazard engagement. It's one that I think most Zerg players figured they'd die to. And it's kind of just like, oh, okay, maybe that was good enough, but it still wasn't great. Still wasn't good enough for the situation, which is that Byun is still mining a decent bit more. Starting to run out, but now he's got another base. He's got mules being called down. And he's got ghosts that are suddenly very useful. In the low supply situations where there's not a lot of Lings to complicate matters, they're actually pretty useful. Because they make sure to punish any transgression. They punish any overstep the Zerg player makes. Any like, well, can I? No. Suddenly you lose an entire Ultra. If Serral had made any amount of Broodlords, he also could have tried sieging them up back here. And it's really unfortunate that Broodlords weren't thought of, because Broodlords also do help with the Ghost Snipes to a degree. It's kind of, it Ghosts counter Broodlords, and then the Fungals come in, right? But if you can actually touch the Ghosts, they are exactly like Pac-Man in that comic. You touch them, they die. Or they stop the snipe anyways. So the Broodlords and the low... what's the word? Low army supply. There we go, games. Like, they are also very microable. An Archon mode Broodlord Ling Muta player could probably do a whole lot. But not in this game. Time has passed for Serral to try and get any amount of Broodlords. Can't really afford it. Can't afford enough of it. It'd be literally 1 or 2 trying to kill him. I think I missed the epic Widowmine failure. Oh no, I didn't. That comes later. Lambos did say Broodlords, but the ghosts coming out really did change. You would have to babysit the Broodlords. The Broodlords went from being an option that if Serral thought of it fast enough to being the ultimate Kingmaker to being like a, well, they might still be good, but now you have to babysit them. So it's just too bad he didn't think of it faster. He's gonna take out a couple of refineries. Anything helps, but then once again found out by the ghost. 4 mutas getting sniped. Plus a couple extra, actually. Things that he could absolutely need. If he got up to 20 mutas, I do wonder, you know? Maybe. 20 mutas can do a lot. 20 mutas can kill production. They obviously one-shot Widow Mines, no problem. They do a lot, but, oh, that is gonna be it. The last fight, not even into what is clearly a larger army, and Serral taps out. So I did miss the mutas. A 41-minute game. I've been saying back and forth. At one point, I do think Serral was a bit ahead, but never to, like, a huge degree. When Byun lost control of the bottom left, or the middle left, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's when he was winning, but, yeah. Man, the Widow Mines must have been something even farther back. At one point, Serral tried to micro against Widow Mines, which would have left him with a lot more mutas, and then he failed pretty catastrophically. And this is the game where he tweeted later that he hallucinated factories. So again, like, he actually ended up having a pretty good start to this game despite that. He still could have had an even better game. And then he actually, he inspected his own Muta Micro on Twitter, if you guys want to check it out. But he explained what happened in case commentators didn't do a good enough job. But so yeah, if they one-shot Widow Mines, it's fine. But first he was spread out, so it got triggered. So he's like, oh fuck, I got hit. Okay, fine, I'll take out the Widow Mine. And then he's like, oh fuck, there's a second Widow Mine. Tries to take that out. It's a little bit too late. Now he doesn't have enough mutas to one-shot a Widow Mine, so it gets the shot, and then he's already dead at that point. That was a, it was him not paying attention, and then habit, I would even say, right? But again, you can see his own thoughts on what went down at that exact time on his Twitter. But that does it. That does it for the Serral Byun series. I think there was a... Obviously, that is a contender for Game of the Year. It was quite good. But it was also good that